Chapter 1093. She leaned against the chair and lazily looked at the book. Her laziness had a kind of elegance to it. Fu Beige's footsteps paused. His breathing was a bit chaotic and his wound even hurt. Wei Bai sensed him and looked up at him. But she saw Fu Beige rushing over and hugging her tightly. Wei Bai shivered. His body was cold and her skin couldn't stand it. "What's wrong?" Fu Beige didn't say anything and just quietly hugged her. That spy's words before he died had completely stirred up the turbulent emotions in his heart. He softly said, "I won't betray you or abandon you. I can do anything for you." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 90. The feelings that were completely awakened suddenly heated up and caught him off guard. Wei Bai blinked. She reached out her hand and slowly stroked his back, comforting and warming him. Fu Beige felt her touch and the hostility that filled his body suddenly disappeared. The fierce battle in his heart was replaced by the tenderness of a woman. Wei Bai's soft voice sounded in his ears, "Fu Beige." Fu Beige nodded. He wondered if Wei Bai was moved by him. Did she want to respond to him? "You're too heavy, I can't breathe under your weight." Fu Beige, inhumane. In such a warm moment, she actually cared about this. He hugged her even more tightly and didn't let go. He raised his head and kissed her lips, entangling their breaths. He bitterly said, "I'll make you even more breathless." This romantic woman, sooner or later, he would let her know how good he was. He was with her. She had earned a lot. The battle plan was still being carried out urgently. The first few towns in the south began to collapse. Although Fu Beige was injured, he was still full of energy. Wei Bai didn't let him touch her. He said that the doctor told him to rest well and not have sex, or else his body would fall ill. So she forbade him from getting on her bed. Although Fu Beige caught the doctor and beat him up, he still couldn't change Wei Bai's mind. He had no choice but to spend his excess energy on the war. He formulated a series of strategic plans. He used all kinds of underhanded tricks to kill Li Xinghe. Fu Beige even thought that the world was not his number one goal. His first goal was to remove the thorn in Li Xinghe's side. Otherwise, he always felt that he would be cuckolded one day. Even though Wei Bai said that she didn't have that kind of feeling for Li Xinghe. But the feeling was born from time to time. In the beginning, Wei Bai didn't have that kind of feeling for him. Wasn't it because he shamelessly got her? Perhaps in the future, Li Xinghe would also find an opportunity to pester Wei Bai. Then, she would throw a green hat on his head. And there was one thing that he couldn't compare to Li Xinghe. That bastard Li Xinghe had studied abroad, and his family had been civil officials for generations. He could speak eloquently and was especially good at literature. This kind of cultured bastard was very popular with women. The more Fu Beige thought about it, the gloomier his face became. After the strategy meeting, he went back to his room and saw Wei Bai sitting by the window, reading a book. Fu Beige's face changed. Wasn't this hobby similar to Li Xinghe's? They both liked books. Wei Bai was reading the romance novel happily when a shadow suddenly shrouded her. She looked up blankly and saw Fu Beige looking at her coldly. Wei Bai, ? What kind of heartless thing did she do to be discovered? / Chapter 1094. Fu Beige suddenly took the book away from her hand. Without looking at it, he started to pack up the box of books that she brought. All of them were stuffed into a box. Then, he asked the adjutant to carry it to the bottom of the lake. This was Wei Bai's spiritual food. She was under so much pressure, and she relied on this little hobby to relieve the pressure. She even wanted to take away the target of her conquest. Wei Bai immediately reached out and grabbed the box. Her expression turned ugly. Why are you venting your anger on my book? If I have offended you in any way, just say it. Fu Beija felt a surge of anger for no reason. I am uncultured. Actually, he was cultured, but he was indeed different from Li Xinghe. After all, when he was learning poetry and calligraphy when he was young, he avoided it as much as he could. Even if he learned it, he did not think much of it. When he grew up, even if he went overseas, he was only interested in other people's ships and cannons. He didn't pay any attention to the damned philosophy of art. Thinking about it, he, Wei Bai, and Li Xinghe were actually from a similar family. But Wei Bai and Li Xinghe were more similar. They were not similar to him. They were both gentle and elegant. They even looked like husband and wife. They were even childhood sweethearts. The more he thought about it, the more Fu Beija felt that these two people might really get together in the future. In the future, he would definitely be cuckolded. Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. Uncultured. Could it be that you are illiterate? The first time she saw him, his expression was like a hurricane. In 3 seconds, he changed more than 10 times. Fu Beija said, more or less. So, to be compatible, from today onwards, you will be illiterate like me. Wei Bai, what kind of weird reason is this? Fu Beija felt that since he did not want her to read, he should not let her be idle. Who knew if she would think of Li Xinghe? He couldn't bear the thought of it for even a second. Fu Beija immediately pulled her, let's go shopping. Wei Bai glanced at his wound. He had just woken up a few days ago, but his legs were already wobbly when he walked. Yet, he still wanted to go shopping. Who would have thought that Fu Beija actually had such a hobby? Wei Bai carefully maintained her favorability towards him as they were pressed for time. Then, she became more obedient towards Fu Beija. So she nodded. Sure, where do you want to go shopping? Fu Beija immediately changed his clothes, and a trace of excitement appeared on his face. There are a lot of imported goods on the streets here, all of which are not available in the north. I'll take you to buy them. Suddenly, he paused. Because he was in too much of a hurry to put on his clothes, his wound was pulled, and it was very painful. Before Wei Bai could say anything, Fu Beija's face sank again. I'm already injured, and you're not worried about me going out to buy things. Are you still thinking about someone else? Wei Bai, the system sighed faintly, this unreasonable man. Wei Bai's mouth twitched. Then let's not go out. After all, your wound hasn't healed. Fu Beija could be considered a weirdo. If a normal person suffered such an injury, they would probably still be lying in bed on the verge of death. Yet, Fu Beija was full of energy. Fu Beija's expression became even worse. Do you think that I'll embarrass you if I go out with you? Or do you think that I'm too boring and you don't want me to follow you? Wei Bai, the system said, this jealous little princess is so pretentious. Host, it's time for you to show your boyfriend power. Wei Bai really wanted to kick little Princess Fu Beija out. But she had no choice, her favorability was not full yet. The. Chapter 1095. She could only swallow her anger and coax him. Of course I won't despise you, Fu Beija snorted and said sourly, if Li Xinghe asked you out, you'd probably go. You guys can go to tea parties, drama, poetry, philosophy. Wei Bai finally couldn't hold it in. Can I break this bastard's head? The system said, although I support you, unfortunately you can't. Wei Bai said, such a pretentious man makes me want to kill someone. The system was touched. You finally know how I feel every time I see you acting like a pretentious little white flower. Wei Bai, she was doing it for her livelihood, for her favorability, for this stupid system's house. Otherwise, why would she act like that? Was she such a pretentious person? Thinking about it carefully, she seemed to be a little bit like that. After all, she was very happy to act like a pretentious little white flower. Who asked a little white flower to gain favorability so quickly? Look at this world, she wasn't a little white flower, but the male lead was a substitute prince who was sick. And the favorability was as slow as a snail. Wei Wei Bai thought deeply, could it be that her path as a little white flower was the correct one? So many targets liked the little white flower. Men were indeed cheap, they liked that pretentious little princess. Fu Beija reached out and pinched Wei Wei Bai's chin. You actually distracted me, who are you thinking about? Li Xinghe. Wei Wei Bai waved her hand and slapped his hand away. I'm thinking about you, who else would I be thinking about? What she said was against the rules. Fu Beija's heart was pounding. Without much experience in love, a hooligan's first love would also be at a loss like an idiot. He forced himself to maintain that helplessness, his face still gloomy. Fu Beija pursed his lips, then let's go shopping. He finally came back. Wei Wei Bai looked at him warily. She would not agree to go out. He would have to repeat the words "you don't care about my wound" again. All right. She agreed like walking on thin ice. Fu Beija smiled and extended his arm. Hold my hand. Wei Wei Bai silently held his hand. One look and you can tell that we are husband and wife. This position is very good. Fu Beija said with a smile. Wei Wei Bai, I have nothing to say. The system secretly stuffed snacks into its mouth and couldn't help but mutter, it's more like a father taking care of his kindergarten daughter. It didn't say that there was a difference in their height. Fu Beija was too tall, while Wei Wei Bai was petite like the girls from Jiangnan. Just think of the tall and strong bear-like men in the north and the delicate little girl in the south. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that she should buy the system's house. Otherwise, if it couldn't get married in the future, wouldn't it cling to her for the rest of its life? She thought of her white hair and teeth falling out. This lowly system was still making sarcastic remarks. She felt that her future was dark. Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to the most famous tailor shop in the city to order clothes. She didn't bring enough clothes with her this time. She brought a lot of books. The winter in the south was cold and wet. One could fall sick if they weren't careful. Fu Beija didn't want Wei Wei Bai to drag down her body because of the cold. The tailor carefully measured Wei Wei Bai's size. Fu Beija sat on the chair with a cigarette in his hand and looked at her with gentle eyes. It was as if she was the most precious treasure in his arms. No matter how he looked at her, he felt that she was beautiful and that he couldn't wait to hold her. If a man liked a woman, there was no need for words. It could be seen in his eyes. He couldn't hide his deep feelings. Wei Wei Bai said something to the tailor and casually looked up. She saw Fu Beija leaning on the chair. The sunlight outside the window shone on him. For a moment, she was in a daze. She felt that this scene was unusually familiar. She thought for a moment and inexplicably remembered that Yi Yuxuan had also brought her to a tailor before. It was an engagement dress. At that time, Yi Yuxuan's eyes were also like this man's. It was so gentle and made people feel an inexplicable sense of calmness. Chapter 1096. After making the clothes, Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to buy some imported goods. They were all women's toys. Wei Wei Bai picked out a pair of gloves and a tie for Fu Beija. Fu Beija was overjoyed. During dinner, Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to eat Western food. He helped Wei Wei Bai cut the steak and taught her how to taste wine. Wei Wei Bai said that it was hard for her to pretend that she didn't know how to. When they went back, the sky was already dark. Fu Beija was wearing a black coat. Under his beautiful short hair, his eyes were always looking at Wei Bai. When he saw that it was snowing, he personally held an umbrella to shield Wei Bai from the snow. The two of them walked slowly on the long road. The snowflakes fell on the umbrella. At this moment, Fu Beija couldn't help but hold her slender shoulders. He said softly, "I've never been so calm before." In his life, other than his short childhood, he had never had a day of peace and stability. Every time he saw other people being in love or foolishly leading their families to play some childish games, the first thing he felt was not the warmth of a family. It was whether this group of people was sick. But when he met Wei Bai, he realized that he was sick too. And seriously sick. Wei Bai looked up at him and said indifferently, "Ever since I met you, I haven't had a day of peace." Fu Beija didn't expect her to say this. He was speechless for a moment. Although the Bai family was lonely, they still had a family background. Wei Bai led a good life. And later on, the Fu family took care of her until the day she married him. Her peaceful days were broken. Fu Beija felt a rare trace of guilt in his heart. "In the future, when you're with me, I'll let you live a happy and peaceful life every day." Wei Bai glanced at him. "Come on, you're fighting. If I die in the gunfire one day, it won't be peaceful." Fu Beija was a little dissatisfied. He reached out and pinched her pink cheeks. "You have so little confidence in me. Am I the kind of man who will put you in danger?" He had prepared a lot of escape routes for her. Even if he died unexpectedly in the future, the escape route he left behind would allow Bai Wei to live peacefully. In the end, there was still a way out. He had even arranged for her to leave the country in advance. Even if the war in the country, she didn't need to stay here. It wasn't that he didn't have confidence, but it was his instinct to not let her suffer the slightest accident. When Fu Beija was arranging a backup plan for her, he wanted to use all of his resources, for fear that she would be wronged. There had never been a woman who could make him put in so much effort. She was still not satisfied. He was so capable and good. Shouldn't she be grateful? Seeing that Fu Beija's face was getting more and more bitter, Wei Bai was afraid that his prince syndrome would act up again. She immediately took out a pair of mail gloves from her bag. She held his hand. The early winter snow was mixed with light rain. It was extremely wet and cold. His fingers were also stained with coldness. She lowered her head and put on the gloves for him. "I bought it for you just now. It's cold, try it on." Fu Beija knew that she bought it for him. But when she lowered her head, a few strands of hair in the bun stuck to her fair neck. Her eyes were gentle as she bent down to put on the gloves for him. The warmth of this moment. He was so touched that his eyes welled up. Wei Bai put on the gloves for him. She looked up and was about to say something. Chapter 1097. He had already bent down and kissed her lips softly. His breath hit her face. His moist lips and tongue were a bit domineering, but more importantly, he was cherishing her. He held the umbrella with one hand and held her fingers with the other. Just like that, under the snow, under the umbrella, he kissed her almost sincerely. He loved her. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 93. Warmth was slow to gain traction, but once he was moved, then the favorability would naturally rise without any need for any large-scale melodramatic stimulation. Wei Bai knew this, and even knew that although Fu Beija was an adventurer, he still longed for a gentle and peaceful life. She had now become the most peaceful and beautiful thing in his world. When she was being led back by Fu Beija, she sighed. She suddenly sighed, "Tongzi, if only you could give me another 10 years. She had thought countless times that if she had enough time, there would be no restrictions. She was able to turn any kind of sadistic writing into a long-lasting and sweet farming writing. She would not need to keep looking for explosive stimuli to desperately increase the favorability of the target. The system was silent for a while before saying, "I'll apply for a plane that takes a long time to conquer." Wei Bai said, "Isn't it random? I can still apply." She had always thought that the planes were randomly distributed. The system said, "It's random, but you have one chance to apply for a plane. Because we're too poor and our status is too low, we only have the right to apply, but we may not succeed." Wei Bai, how poor and lowly were she and the system? Applying for a plane did not seem reliable, it was like winning the lottery. She thought about it and decided to apply. If she did not apply, she would not have the chance anyway. And she was actually quite lucky. When she was 15, she bought a lottery ticket. She won $5. She still had the luck to win the lottery. Wei Bai said, "Okay, apply. It's best if you can apply for a plane that can be conquered for 10 to 20 years. The system said, "I'll go fill in the application." Wei Bai was very heroic. Go. He always felt that the host would kill him if his application was not approved. The system glanced at the remaining HP in its hand. It was too poor. Bribing through the back door was not even enough to buy a system flower basket. Who was the host that didn't manage to get in through the back door last time? I forgot. It seemed to be something that happened 10,000 years ago. After returning home, it was rare that Fu Beija was not beastly. He hugged her and chatted with her like this. As they chatted, he slowly fell asleep. The wound was still dragging down his body, making him not as lively as before. His sleeping appearance was especially quiet and handsome. The warm light shone on his face, without a trace of his usual ruthlessness and irritation. He was more like a carefree, pampered young man. Wei Bai stared at him for a while before she finally dared to sneakily reach under her pillow and take out a romance novel. She had read half of the novel before she went to bed and stuffed it under her pillow. This book was melodramatic, cliché, exciting, and interesting. As for other novels, it was probably because of the era, even if they were novels about love and love. But they still wanted some face and tried to make the story as literary as possible. But this book, it was not like that. What cheating, being a cuckold, getting pregnant with another man's child after being a cuckold. She ran away with the ball, but halfway through, she was miscarried by her love rival. After the miscarriage, she was caught. Her husband thought that she had miscarried the child, so he imprisoned her and abused her to vent his anger. After a while, they got together again, and she got pregnant again. Then came the mistress, Chapter 1098. There were only 2 days left. Wei Bai crossed his arms and paced back and forth. The last 5 points of affinity, if there was no excitement, it would take a year to get it. So, all the talk of a steady stream flowing slowly was nonsense. It had to be explosive, exciting, and melodramatic. Without a pot of Mao Shui Wang, the affinity would not increase. Bai Weiwei thought about it. Should I create an accident, such as taking a grenade to blow myself up, or find a way to drug Fu Beija and send him to someone else's bed, and then create a big tragedy where you tear me apart and I roar at him in anger? Otherwise, the affinity won't increase at all. The system said, "You've been reading too many novels recently, you need to slow down. Reality is different from novels. The host is obsessed with reading. If he did that, Fu Beija's affinity would only decrease." Wei Bai sighed, "Time's up, how did I die?" The system said faintly, "You were killed by a bomb dropped from a plane. Maybe the main system thought you were too heartless, but you never failed your side mission, so it couldn't find a reason to strike you with lightning, so it could only make a fuss about how you died." Wei Bai said, Have you always found me an eyesore? Why do you always make me feel hopeless every time you speak? The system said, how can you think like that, aren't we friends? Wei Wei Bai said, eating from the same bowl doesn't mean we're friends, we could be dogs fighting for food. The system said, you've lowered yourself to the level of a dog just to diss me, you've never loved me. Wei Wei Bai said, I didn't even love you, how could I love you? The system said, I'm just saying that to stimulate your fighting spirit, how can you ignore my efforts? Wei Wei Bai said, I love to hear compliments, you should say more about me. The system said, what kind of compliments do you like, I'll look for them. Wei Wei Bai said, compliment my strengths, I have so many. The system said, that's true, your strengths, after a long silence. The system said, fine, I admit I'm a dog, you don't have any strengths. Wei Wei Bai. The host, system, fell into deep confusion. Why did I meet such an inhumane, shameless, thing in the first place? Wei Wei Bai pulled on his hair to relieve his stress. The system suddenly said, your mother is here. Bai Wei Wei trembled, what, my mom also transmigrated, or was she reincarnated? Her mom and dad and age and forth. The system said, I mean, Chenru. Fu Beijia's stepmother was also Bai Wei Wei's stepmother. Bai Wei Wei, Pei, what kind of mother is she? If she really had such a mother, she would have to commit suicide. Otherwise, wouldn't this kind of bad genes be passed on to future generations? Bai Wei Wei, what is she doing here? Are you here to take revenge after I knocked your head? The system looked at Chenru's situation and concluded, they are here to show their weakness to you. At the same time, they are also prepared to use force to kidnap you. Wei Wei Bai, kidnap me. I am surrounded by Fu Beijia's men, even if I wanted to kidnap myself, it would be difficult. The system said, Chenru needs a lot of money. Her family lost a lot of money because of business, and she was involved in that. That's why she's so anxious to get you into the family. She wants you to give birth to the child so that she can control the Fu family. Once he was in control of the Fu family and the Fu family's huge assets, any debt would not be a problem. Crossover system, Adonis, come here, /crossover system, Adonis, come here, / crossover system, Adonis, come here. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1099. Wei Wei Bai's face lit up with joy, you're a good person. I was just worried sick, and Philanthropist Chin came to solve my problem. The system. Philanthropist Chin. Wei Wei Bai smiled and said, it's too easy for me to give myself away when I planned the kidnapping. Chenru came at the right time. She hates me to the core, so she won't show me any mercy. The system, so what kind of philanthropist is this? Isn't she an enemy? Wei Wei Bai said, it's because of the good karma I've accumulated that I'm able to help you in your hour of need today. The system, you're even using your enemy to attack, are you a devil? Wei Wei Bai asked, where is Chenru now? The system, she just arrived in the city. I haven't sent her an invitation to visit you yet. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment, then put on a thick and beautiful winter coat and shoes. She then opened the jewelry box that Fu Beijia gave her. She carefully selected a set of expensive green jadeite earrings inlaid with gold. The style of the jade was older. But Wei Wei Bai's skin was tender. After putting it on, the jade was as green as bamboo after the rain. It looked even better. Wei Wei Bai put on a gold bracelet. The system, are you planning to hang a villa on your body? The jewelry that she was wearing was obviously very expensive. And it was not low-key expensive. Anyone who saw it would think that it was expensive to see rich people. Wei Wei Bai was still choosing the ring. The inlaid gems had to be big, and wearing two would make it look expensive. She took a last look at herself in the mirror. She was full of jewels. Even the collar of the winter coat was made of expensive fox fur. If it were anyone else wearing this, their delicate body would be covered by the expensive aura. But Wei Wei Bai was fair enough, so fair that she was as cold as snow. Therefore, she forced herself to give off a noble yet clean aura when she wore these gorgeous things. Wei Wei Bai slowly adjusted her cuffs. Do you know? I want to make a woman who has gone crazy from debt feel even more enmity towards me, and even want to strangle me to death. I want to show off that I'm living a good life, 10,000 times better than her. She was wearing such expensive clothes. Only then could Chen-Rook see her painstaking efforts. The system said, you should accumulate some virtue. Wei Wei Bai laughed. Ha! Fu Beija would only return at night because of military matters. Wei Wei Bai went out, followed by a group of people. She had only taken 2 steps when she suddenly frowned and turned back. She said coldly, there's no need for so many people. I want to go shopping. Are you going to clear the streets? The adjutant hesitated for a moment before nodding and allowing half of the men to return. The remaining half of the people secretly hid and followed her. Wei Wei Bai knew that she couldn't chase them away, but there couldn't be too many people following them in such a secretive manner. Chen-Rook should be able to handle it. Wei Wei Bai was worried sick about this kidnapping case. The system spent some time to find Chen-Rook's car. The car passed by a street. Wei Wei Bai immediately raised her head and puffed out her chest, trying to let Chen-Rook see her posture. She walked past the car. After a dozen steps, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai lazily turned around, her eyes cold. Chen-Rook was in a hurry and didn't have time to change her clothes. She was travel-worn and looked embarrassed. Especially when Wei Wei Bai was so delicate and noble. She looked old and ugly. Wei Wei Bai looked at her from head to toe, her eyes full of ridicule, 7 parts frivolity and 3 parts indifference. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. The is at https://m.sashu.com/. Chapter 1100. Then she said in a noble and arrogant tone, isn't this old Madam Chin? I didn't recognize you when you changed your clothes. Why, did you change your style? You're dressed like this. Ha! Chen-Rook's smile froze. Her heart was pierced by Wei Wei Bai. She was a vain woman to begin with, and she was used to being flattered by others. But Wei Wei Bai stabbed her like this. It was humiliating. Resentment intertwined into venom, making her tremble in pain. She came to ask for peace and had no choice but to take this dangerous path. But seeing Wei Wei Bai like this, she couldn't pull her face down. She even wanted her to die. Chen-Rook was so angry that blood was coming out of her chest, but she still smiled gently. Wei Wei Bai, I saw a woman like you coming to this war-torn place with Beijia. I was worried, so I came to see you. Wei Wei Bai said, oh, faintly, but the sarcasm on her face didn't change. She raised her finger, revealing the shining gem ring and the golden bracelet. It blinded Chen-Rook. Wei Wei Bai said, see, I'm doing much better than you, and it will get better in the future. You don't have to worry, you can go back to that old house and wait for death. Chen-Rook couldn't take it anymore. How can you say that? I'm your mother-in-law. Wei Wei Bai waved her hand, making the gem ring more conspicuous. Yes, 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 mother-in-law. Chen-Rook was so angry that she took 2 steps forward. Wei Wei Bai immediately stepped back. You're dirty. My clothes are very expensive, and your smell is bad. Don't touch me. Chen-Rook was so angry that she almost died on the spot. The system couldn't bear to look. Host, you don't even want to say the evil female supporting character, it's too low class. What kind of conversation was this? Chenru was the miserable and pitiful main character. The host was a vicious cannon fodder who was about to die. Wei Wei Bai flipped her hair again, revealing the gold and jade pendant, trying to provoke Chenru to explode. So be it, as long as it's useful. She could see the vicious hatred in Chenru's eyes. If it was not so exciting, when would Chenru kidnap her? He would probably approach her in a pitiful and tender manner. After all, no one would walk onto a dead end until they reached the final step. And offending Fu Beija was undoubtedly the most terrifying path to take. Wei Wei Bai did this to tell Chenru. It was useless for her to play with him, forcing her into a dead end. Wei Wei Bai saw that she was almost done provoking her. She looked at her coldly and arrogantly. All right, that's enough reminiscing. I'm leaving. Beija dotes on me. He doesn't want me to go out for too long. With that, Wei Wei Bai turned around and left. When she turned around, Chenru's face twisted with resentment. This was the first time she hated a woman so much. She had married handsome Fu, a man of a higher status than Fu Beija. But in the end, he ended up like this. Why could Wei Wei Bai get Fu Beija's love and live such a life of luxury? She was the one who let Wei Wei Bai marry into the family. Wei Wei Bai was simply an ungrateful wretch. She did not know how to be grateful at all. She even took away her military order. The more Chenru thought about it, the more she felt that Wei Wei Bai was the enemy who took everything away from her. She wanted to soften Wei Wei Bai and please Wei Wei Bai so that she would believe in her. But now, she was disappearing bit by bit. She wanted Wei Wei Bai to die. Die now. Chenru gave a secret signal to the people in the car. Then she quickly chased after them and shouted to Wei Wei Bai, Wei Wei Bai, I just came here. Can I stay at your place? I'll stay for 2 or 3 days before leaving. Chapter 1101. Wei Wei Bai walked in a circle towards a place with many blind spots. Once there were many blind spots, the bodyguards behind her would not be able to see her. Finally, she came to a special area that was some distance away from the bodyguards behind her. She turned around and saw Chenru running towards her, panting. She needed a bigger surprise to get Chenru to kidnap her. Otherwise, she would be intercepted by Fu Beija's men before the kidnapping was successful. Wei Wei Bai felt that she must be the first person in the world who tried so hard to make the kidnapper succeed. When Chenru saw Wei Wei Bai stop, a trace of ecstasy flashed through her heart. She gritted her teeth, the coldness and hatred in her eyes emerging. Her friendly expression was especially ferocious. She rushed a few steps forward and immediately grabbed Wei Wei Bai's hand. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked at her in surprise. Chenru cried, Wei Wei, I'm your mother-in-law. How can you bear to see me sleeping in the open? Wei Wei Bai was about to speak. Suddenly, there was an explosion. Out of nowhere, a grenade was thrown into the next room. The house exploded, and she was affected by the explosion. She felt the burning heat and staggered. She was almost knocked down by the force of the attack. Chenru's face flashed a trace of ecstasy. The plan worked. A few men ran out of the thick smoke and then grabbed Wei Wei Bai and ran forward. A black car rushed out. They immediately stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the car. In the thick smoke, the bodyguards behind Wei Wei Bai also rushed out, but they were not fast enough. Wei Wei Bai was already out of sight. The bodyguards protecting Wei Wei Bai looked at each other, their faces pale. Fu Beija, who received the news, immediately stood up. The officers following him looked at him in surprise. Fu Beija's cold face was covered with a layer of frost. His eyes were red with anger. He pulled the safety off the gun and coldly said, "Put on your weapons." The officer behind him immediately asked, "Are we going to war?" Fu Beige's murderous aura was ice cold. "Open your head. This daddy's woman has been kidnapped. It seems that I was too merciful. Once you catch them, kill them without mercy." The officer immediately responded, "Yes, young marshal." On the other hand, Li Xinghe was planning how to defend against Fu Beige. Both armies were eyeing each other covetously, and a war could break out at any moment. The situation was not optimistic. Suddenly, Fu Beige's army received the order and retreated. The situation was so good that Li Xinghe's chances of winning were not high. Fu Beige had been planning for so long, and he was just a step away from occupying a more advantageous position. They had actually retreated. Could it be a different type of trap? Li Xinghe fell into deep thought, and then asked someone to find out what happened to Fu Beige. The officers on this side were all happy. If Fu Beige's side retreated at this time, then we would be able to occupy a more advantageous position. We will immediately attack now. Li Xinghe also nodded, thinking that it was very reasonable. The adjutant who had been asking around for a while finally rushed in happily. "Governor, Fu Beige is crazy. He didn't even want to fight because of a woman." Li Xinghe did not know how to react. "What woman?" The adjutant said happily, "It's Fu Beige's wife. I heard that she was kidnapped by her enemies." Fu Beige was greatly affected and sent all his elites to rescue her. "Now that there is only an empty shell over there, we should quickly start the war." Li Xinghe's face immediately turned pale. "Wei Wei." The adjutant was overjoyed. Li Xinghe immediately kicked away the overjoyed adjutant, pulled out his gun and roared, "Bring the weapons, let's go." The rest of the officers were stunned. "Where are we going? Are we going to attack?" Li Xinghe turned around with a murderous look. "Where else can we go? We're going to save my childhood sweetheart." Chapter 1102. Wei Wei Bai was tied to a chair. It was an old and rundown warehouse. Every kidnapping location was always such a rundown place. Wei Wei Bai thought that the villains were too poor. Couldn't they just go to a hotel and get a few rooms, and then negotiate while everyone drank and ate a luxurious lunch? After all, she was a project with 10 boxes of gold bars. There was no food, no drink, and the place was dirty and messy. The kidnappers of this batch could not keep up with the times. Wei Wei Bai chatted with the system, "When Fu Beige comes, remember to tell me." The system said, "What if he doesn't come?" Wei Wei Bai said, 95 points of affinity. "If he doesn't come, I'll livestream myself eating affinity points." Was her strategy for so long fake? How could he not come? The system said, "Okay, he's here." He came quickly, and he came with an army. The villains looked miserable, with less than 100 people. Their weapons were shabby, with only a box of bombs and half a box of grenades. Guns were not the same as Fu Beige. Wei Wei Bai quickly looked around, and found that Chenru did not know that she had been exposed. She was still chatting and laughing with the people who had come with him outside the door. She thought that the gold bars would be in her bag. Chenru thought that once she got the money, she would kill the hostage. Then she would escape abroad, and Fu Beige would not be able to catch her. Women had long hair, but short wit. She thought that her plan was flawless. She did not know how many eyes there were in the city. She brought 100 people with her, and even the passers-by did not have time to notice. But people from all walks of life, beggars, and peddlers had sharp eyes. Chenru had not even called Fu Beige to ask for the ransom. When Fu Beige cleaned up the city, those eyes came back and forth like surveillance cameras. They had already told her about Chenru's whereabouts. Wei Wei Bai listened to the system and calculated the time. If Fu Beijia were to come here directly, Chenru would be standing at the door. Fu Beijia was also a daring and merciless person. He immediately shot at Chenru and killed her. Then, the army marched over. Chenru's men were probably all dead. At that time, as a hostage, she would not be of any use at all. This kidnapping would be resolved by Fu Beijia. Wei Wei Bai was exasperated. There weren't many villains who could do it. She only had about a day and a half left. If today's excitement wasn't enough, then, there would be no chance for them to continue. Wei Wei Bai thought hard about the plan, and then she lowered her eyes. Her feet were not tied, so she kicked away the broken chair beside her. The sound startled Chenru. She immediately walked in with a scowl. "What's wrong, young mistress? Are you running away?" Wei Wei Bai immediately put on a face that was asking for a beating. "I'm hungry." Chenru sneered. "Do you really think you're a big shot? Am I your servant?" She took a big step forward and grabbed her chin, glaring at her angrily. "Wei Wei Bai, you're in my hands now. If I want you to live, you'll live. If I want you to die, you'll die. Who do you think you are? Even if you're hungry, you'd better hold it in." Bai Weiwei's face was unafraid. The corner of her mouth curled into a sneer of contempt. "You really don't dare to do anything to me. I'm your money tree now. Beijia loves me so much. I'm worth a lot of money." Chenru was shocked. She said that she was worth a lot of money. How could she say that? You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 1103. What happened to the gentle and virtuous girl? Bai Weiwei leisurely glanced around again. "Besides, you left me alone in the warehouse while everyone else is guarding outside. Beijia's soldiers are all experienced in the battlefield. He will shoot all of you as soon as he comes. I'll be fine even if all of you die." Chenru was shocked. Yes, that made sense. She immediately turned around and shouted, "20 people come in. Pull out your weapons and point them at Wei Wei Bai. Don't let Fu Beijia have a chance to attack." Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and snorted. "It's useless even if you point your guns at me. You better put the bombs around the warehouse and threaten Beijia when you see him. If he wants to save me, you will detonate the bombs and die together with him." Chenru trembled. "But what if the bombs hit us?" Wei Wei Bai sneered. "Why are you such a coward? You know how powerful Beijia is. If I don't do that, I won't be able to scare him." Chenru thought about it. Yes, that made sense. She immediately turned around and shouted, "Quick, bury the bombs." Wei Wei Bai added, "Besides, you're so calm. How will Beijia believe that you're serious? You better get a whip or something. You can whip me and ask for money. I'm sure you can get it." Chenru thought about it. That was exactly what she wanted. She didn't like this little shameless girl. She couldn't be more satisfied with whipping her. Wait, who would let others whip them? Chenru's face darkened. "What's your motive? Why are you telling me this?" Wei Wei Bai looked at her. She wasn't that stupid. Her face changed immediately. Fear appeared on her pale face. She was about to cry. "I'm afraid that you'll kill me. You can let me go if you get the money." She started crying as she spoke. "You have to let me go. I'll ask Beijia to give you the money." Chenru was relieved to see such a stupid and cowardly girl. It was human nature to be afraid of death. Wei Wei Bai's behavior was normal, and her brain wasn't working well. He actually pointed out all of their flaws. This would allow them to better guard against Fu Beijia. She was indeed an inexperienced woman. Chen Ru sneered, "Beg me then." Wei Weibai cried, "Will you let me go if I beg you?" Chen Ru, how is that possible? Wei Weibai's expression immediately turned cold. She no longer looked as timid as before. Then why should I beg you? It's a waste of time. Chen Ru, Wei Weibai had really put in a lot of effort so that the villains could succeed. The system said, "Li Xinghe is here too." Wei Weibai asked, "What is he doing here?" The system said, "Save the childhood friend." Wei Weibai, even the side quests don't make me worry. She had already completed the side quests, but Li Xinghe still came to cause trouble. As soon as Fu Beijia saw Li Xinghe, he lost his temper and didn't care about increasing his affinity. Wei Weibai leaned her head on the chair and said weakly, "System, why don't you just send me to heaven with a grenade and forget about this strategy?" The system said, "Don't be sad. You've been working so hard for so long, you're just one step away." Wei Weibai said, "This step is so big that I feel like I'm going to pull on my balls. The pressure is making my hair fall out." The system said, "Don't you still have me by your side? I'm your little angel of positive energy, the sunflower that shines on your little world." Wei Weibai was so disgusted that tears almost fell out of her eyes. The pressure is even greater. The system still had a bad mouth. At least it wasn't disgusting. The next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you liked the Chapter 1104. Chen Ru was also afraid of Fu Beijia. After all, she had seen Fu Beijia's methods. Everyone was afraid of him. That cruel and callous look of his had scared countless people to tears. Chen Ru arranged everything. Bombs, hostages, everything was ready. She was about to call Fu Beijia. However, she did not give the order. The people guarding outside were already afraid of running in. "Madam, there are so many people outside. It's just a kidnapping, but the army is here." Chen Ru's heart sank when she heard this. She also heard that Fu Beijia was on the battlefield. She thought that Fu Beijia liked Wei Weibai. He could only come himself or ask his adjutant to come. After all, every inch of land in war was an inch of blood. A man who conquered the world would not give up the war to save Wei Weibai. Chen Ru immediately ran to the door and saw countless soldiers in front of her. What was more frightening was that she heard the roar of an airplane. The car that led the way was a sedan. The car stopped and a man opened the door. He was dressed in military uniform and his eyes were as cold and sharp as a hawk's. He got out of the car. It was Fu Beijia. He pulled out his gun, pursed his lips, and unlocked the safety expressionlessly. Then, his voice was terrifyingly cold. "Surround this place for this daddy." Chen Ru's world turned dark when she heard this. She immediately ran into the warehouse, trembling. Behind her, the people she brought with her shouted in fear, "The army is here again." Chen Ru looked back in shock and saw a huge army in the distance. She could not see the number of soldiers. At first glance, it was obvious that they were well-trained and cold-blooded elite soldiers. Chen Ru's legs almost turned to jelly. What was going on? It was just a kidnapping. Or did they kidnap in the wrong place? The outside had become a battlefield. Wei Weibai heard that Li Xinghe and Fu Beijia's army met outside the warehouse. Like Chen Ru, her eyes were about to turn dark. This time, it was not her who provoked Fu Beijia. It was Li Xinghe. The two of them were already fighting. In the end, they all ran to the warehouse at the same time. Didn't they just change the battlefield and continue fighting? At that time, it would be strange if Fu Beige's favorability increased. His attention would be drawn away by Li Xinghe. As expected, the soldiers outside began to run madly. Set up the cannons. Quick, dig a trench and pile up the soil. There are a lot of infantrymen on the other side. This is the tempo of a direct battle. Li Xinghe wasn't much better off. Their governor had come to rescue his childhood sweetheart. He was up against Fu Beige again. That was why the war between the North and the South was so intense. Was it because of Wei Wei Bai? Fu Beige saw Li Xinghe occupying the other side of the warehouse. Both sides were on the defensive. The atmosphere was like a tiger watching its prey, ready to erupt at any moment. Fu Beige sneered. Li Xinghe, is it your turn to save my woman? Your intentions are so obvious. Don't be so shameless. Wei Wei was already his wife. Li Xinghe was still so brazenly coveting it. He might as well get rid of him today so that he wouldn't be cuckolded by this guy in the future. Li Xinghe didn't look good, but his voice was calm. I'm Wei Wei's friend. We've been friends for many years. We're childhood friends who depend on each other. We're even soul friends who have gone through life and death together. Why can't I save her when she's in trouble? A narrow-minded man like you isn't worthy of her. Fu Beige's heart twitched. Friends for many years, childhood friends, soul friends. He even said that he was repaying a debt of gratitude. This was simply mental derailment. Fu Beige was furious. He directly fired at Li Xinghe. It doesn't matter if I'm not worthy of her. I'll kill everyone who's worthy of her, so that she can only choose me. Li Xinghe dodged, and the officer protecting Li Xinghe immediately pulled out his gun and opened fire. The bullets from both sides started to crackle. Chen Ru was trembling. She was afraid that the helicopter above would drop a bomb and blow the warehouse up. Wei Wei Bai's face was filled with despair. Let Li Xinghe and Fu Beige fight each other. How could they fight each other? The two men outside were already in a killing frenzy. They even forgot that she was kidnapped. The system said, "How about you take the initiative to attack?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. Suddenly, he kicked Chen Ru's butt. Chen Ru jumped up in shock. What are you doing? Wei Wei Bai roared, "Idiot, do you want to live or not? Quickly point your gun at my head and push me to the door." Chen Ru thought of the battle outside and her hands trembled. She couldn't even hold the gun properly. Wei Wei Bai encouraged her, "Do you have any experience in kidnapping? How can you earn money if you're so scared? How can you live a good life? How can you sell jewelry and wear fancy clothes abroad? Don't waste time, go out and threaten them." Chen Ru was at a loss and could only follow Wei Wei Bai's words. She pulled out her gun and pointed it at Wei Wei Bai's head. Then, she hid behind Wei Wei Bai and let her go to the door. The two sides were fighting to the fullest. They didn't see Wei Wei Bai at all. Wei Wei Bai said, "Shout something." Chen Ru stuttered, "Shout, shout what?" Wei Wei Bai was angry and roared, "What else can you shout? Everyone, stop. If you don't stop, I'll pay you or you'll kill me." The threat was loud and clear. The battlefield was silent for a while. Li Xinghe and Fu Beige suddenly remembered something. At the same time, they turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai at the door. They seemed to be here to save someone. // Chapter 1105. Everyone and all the guns were aimed at Wei Wei Bai and Chen Ru at the door at almost the same time. Chen Ru's fingers were trembling non-stop. She was also inexperienced and had never seen so many guns pointed at her. She didn't even know how to speak. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to lift Chen Ru up and shake her. "Villain, why are your legs so weak? Rise up, be angry, explode. Hurry up and threaten and abuse her. Otherwise, where would the gold bars and favorability come from? Wei Wei Bai was really angered by this villain. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Steady your hands, hide behind me and don't show your head. Otherwise, Fu Beija, that sharpshooter, would be able to shoot Chen Ru in the head with one shot." Chen Ru's voice was choked with sobs. "I was wrong, I won't do it again. I'll let you go, can you let me go?" In such a big situation, she was really scared. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "If you dare to put down the gun, I'll immediately turn you into a sieve. You better change your attitude as a kidnapper. When your seniors see you like this, they won't be able to hold on to their coffins." Chen Ru felt that both the hostage and the person who came to save the hostage were very scary. She really made a mistake that caused everlasting regret. Being threatened by Wei Wei Bai, Chen Ru endured the humiliation and shouted, "Wei Wei Bai is in my hands, if you dare to touch her, I'll kill her." Wei Wei Bai immediately played along and her face turned pale. Her fingers were clenched nervously and her brows were furrowed. Her expression was indescribably soft and fragile. But she said coldly, "Don't worry about me, she won't shoot." Chen Ru really didn't dare to shoot. If she had the thought of holding Wei Wei Bai hostage to threaten Fu Beija before, she would have been scared. She was scared out of her wits by Fu Beija's army. Not to mention that Li Xinghe also came with an army. She knew very well that if anything happened to Wei Wei Bai in her hands, she would not be able to escape the country. She would die a horrible death on the spot. She still had a long life ahead of her, so she couldn't bear to die. He really wanted to throw the gun away. However, Wei Wei Bai refused to let her throw it away. She was simply a demon. Fu Beija waved his hand and asked everyone to put down their guns. He looked at Chen Ru expressionlessly and said, "Let her go, and I'll let you live." Chen Ru almost nodded. Wei Wei Bai held her hand tightly, and Chen Ru was about to cry. She was now in a difficult position. Whether she put down the gun or not, there was no way out. Fu Beija reached into his pocket and put the gun into his pocket. His posture was cold and tense as he looked at the gun that was placed on Wei Wei Bai's head. His heart skipped a beat. Chen Ru's hands were shaking, and he could feel it. Chen Ru did not have much experience in handling guns. If she was not careful, the gun could easily go off. This was a mistake that novices were particularly prone to make. And this mistake was something that he couldn't bear. Fu Beija resisted the trembling and suppressed his violent rage. His face was gloomy and calm. "I'll give you a choice. First, you let Wei Wei go, and I'll give you a box of gold bars, and I promise that I won't trouble you in the future." This choice was simply too tempting. Chen Ru was tempted. She knew that Fu Beija always valued promises, so she could still believe his words. Then she heard Fu Beija's voice, as cold as snow. "Second, you hurt her, and I'll kill your whole family in the most vicious way." Chen Ru had a weakness, and that was that she valued her family. When she heard this, her face turned pale. "Fu Beija, don't threaten me with my family." Fu Beija was desperately attacking her family. This was the reason why she had completely lost her mind and kidnapped Wei Wei Bai. // Chapter 1106. The hatred in her heart was mostly directed at Fu Beija. Fu Beija's face was so cold that he looked like an emotionless statue. Only his eyes were filled with venomous murderous aura. "You were the one who used my family to threaten me first." The place of home in his heart was only left for Wei Wei Bai. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 96. The sky darkened and the wind became colder. Light snow began to fall. Wei Wei Bai wasn't wearing thick clothes, and every time it snowed, she had trouble breathing. Fu Beija saw the snow fall from her hair and his face became even paler. His heart felt like it was being dug out and it hurt. With such careful protection, he thought that he could leave her and fight for his own world. But in less than half a day, she fell into a trap. Fu Beija realized for the first time that he was surrounded by dangers. And he was the one who pulled Wei Wei Bai into this whirlpool. The first day she was about to enter the family. He knew that the Fu family was a wolf's den. Even at that time, he let her enter the family with evil intentions. He wanted her to pay the price for her arrogance. But today, all that was left in his heart was a heavy guilt and a painful pity. He was used to being attacked in the open and in the dark. When he fell in love with a person, he found that the things he was used to were fatal to her. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 97. Wei Wei Bai and the system. The two systems were dumbfounded. He shouted twice in the middle, but Wei Wei Bai didn't do anything awkward. What was Fu Beija thinking? He actually increased the favorability twice. Wei Wei Bai decided to throw away this doubt. She continued to calmly wait for the right time. She looked at the snow falling from the sky. The system said, Li Xinghe is approaching you. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She immediately knew why Fu Beija was stalling for time. Unexpectedly, it was to give Li Xinghe time to save people. The two men who were fighting to the death just now actually had such a good tacit understanding. They cooperated to save people without any hint. Bai Weiwei was just about to remind Chenru, but she opened her mouth and immediately closed it. She couldn't remind him. Now that everyone's attention was on her, it would be abnormal for her to speak in a low voice. This kidnapping case was a complete failure. Although her favorability had increased by 2 points. However, in the remaining time, it was basically impossible to increase it to 100. Wei Wei Bai calmly said, Tongzi, if my strategy fails, can I return to reality? Although the system said that it was possible. However, she had never failed before, so she was not very confident. The system was silent for a while. During this period of silence, it was actually very solemn. Wei Wei Bai instinctively felt that something was wrong, but the system said seriously, I'm here. If you fail, I can escort you back to reality. It'll be fine, don't be afraid. Even if it risked being killed by the main system. It would also drag Wei Wei Bai's soul through the soul channel that might be broken. Before she died, it would die before her. Wei Wei Bai didn't know why, but her heart was filled with a surge of emotion. The system's mouth was poisonous, but it was still very loyal to its friends. The system continued, so seeing how beautiful I am, it's better that you don't fail. Wei Wei Bai, could it make her feel touched for more than 3 seconds? Chenru hesitated again and again, but still couldn't withstand the pressure and said, Can you guarantee that I can leave safely? Fu Beija looked at her gloomily. His voice was so calm that there was a sharp killing intent. Yes, I can guarantee that you can leave safely. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1107. His promise was real. But it had a time limit. Before Wei Wei Bai was safe, he could fulfill any promise he made. Chenru thought of Fu Beija's past examples of keeping promises and felt a little more confident. She looked back and forth at Fu Beija several times before she finally made up her mind and was about to put down the gun in her hand. Li Xinghe, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly appeared beside her and reached out to grab the gun. Wei Wei Bai was pushed away by Li Xinghe. She looked back and saw Li Xinghe ruthlessly kicking Chenru in the stomach and grabbing the gun in her hand, looking like he was about to take the gun away. Because of the sharp pain, Chinru nervously pulled the trigger. And that gun was aimed at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai only felt that this was a terrible development. Was she going to die early? But in the next moment, a tall shadow threw himself on top of her. His heavy and warm chest hugged her petite body, blocking all the danger. Wei Wei Bai was pressed to the ground by him. She opened her eyes wide and saw Fu Beige's worried face. He reached out to hold her face, the worry in his eyes was obvious. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? He asked anxiously. The calm appearance just now was completely shattered. Now Fu Beige's eyes were red and his lips were trembling. Fear finally made him unable to maintain his usual indifference. Wei Wei Bai's face was pinched by him and she vaguely said, I'm okay, don't worry. Fu Beige saw that she was so energetic and his body suddenly relaxed. He smiled, it's good that you're okay. Wei Wei Bai felt that his body was getting heavier and heavier. Fu Beige's eyes began to lose focus, it's good that you're okay. At this moment of relaxation, he finally completely woke up. She was the person he couldn't leave. He would rather die than let her be hurt. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 98. It was only then that Wei Wei Bai realized that his chest had started to bleed. The bullet came from the back. And right in the heart. The target is dead. It was Wei Wei Bai's first time encountering such a situation. No matter how calm she was, she couldn't react in time. Li Xinghe, who had knocked Chinru out with a kick, turned around and saw what was happening. His expression immediately changed and he ran over. He reached out and pulled Fu Beige up. Wei Wei Bai shouted, don't touch him. Li Xinghe paused. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai sat up from the ground. Her fingers trembled as she touched Fu Beige's face. She was barely breathing. The system also reminded him that the target's death was counting down. He's going to die, host. The system's expression was heavy as well. The panic in Wei Wei Bai's eyes was forcefully suppressed. She suddenly said, Li Xinghe, you guard outside and leave the warehouse to me. I want to save him. Li Xinghe knew that she had medical skills, but Fu Beige couldn't hold on. This kind of injury, no matter who came, it would be useless. Li Xinghe's mouth was clumsy, he didn't know what to say. In the end, he was defeated by Wei Wei Bai's stubborn gaze. He immediately evacuated the crowd and told people to guard the warehouse. Then he carried Fu Beige into the warehouse. Wei Wei Bai looked at Fu Beige on the ground. She squatted down and then said to Li Xinghe, you go out, don't let anyone come in. Li Xinghe looked at her thin back. She seemed so lonely at this moment. She whispered, go out, I only trust you now. Li Xinghe's chest tightened. He nodded and then walked out without hesitation. She trusted him. He was worth it. Wei Wei Bai looked at Fu Beige, whose chest was full of blood, and her fingers were trembling from nervousness. Chapter 1108. Her targets were always strong, so strong that she could only rely on self-torture to gain favorability. This was the first time she encountered a target that died before her. Except for conquering ghosts, she said, Tongzi, my medical box still has 2 chances to save a life, is it useful? The box was referring to the chances to save a life. It did not mean that opening it would definitely save a person. The system said, in theory, it's useful. Try it. After all, the reward was an incomplete product that it found, so it did not dare to be too confident. Wei Wei Bai said, I hid the medical box under the bed in the house, I won't be able to get it in time. The system said, it's okay, I'll get it for you. The system had restrictions on taking other things, but it was originally the system's. It could take it directly. Soon, the box appeared in front of Wei Bai. Wei Bai opened it without hesitation. As expected, it was another set of scalpels, and the operation process. It was too difficult. Wei Bai knew that the operation process was not something she could do. She had no choice but to open the box again. At the end of the box was a pair of surgical gloves. They were very thin gloves. The system immediately said, "Put them on quickly. This pair of gloves is a beginner's guide. Once you put them on, they will automatically help you with the operation." Wei Bai immediately put them on. It seemed that the life-saving reward was very reliable. Wei Bai began to operate on Fu Beijia. He was on the verge of death. For this kind of wound, even in the modern operating theater, it would take the best of the best to operate on it, and it would take a lot of effort to succeed. Her operation process was a reward from the system. That was why it was so advanced, even more advanced than modern times. However, the operation had risks, and it was not 100% successful. For the first time, Wei Bai experienced this feeling of extreme tension. She held his life in her hands. The gloves automatically controlled her hands, and her fingers steadily cut open his clothes, skin, and flesh without a trace of trembling, finally revealing the bullet wound. Due to the correct surgical method, not much blood flowed out. It only stained her fingers. The bullet was slowly removed, followed by a series of surgeries. Finally, the flesh was sewn back together. The surgery was finally completed. But his heart had stopped beating. The operation failed. Her hands were stained with Fu Beijia's blood. She sat beside him in a daze. The snow outside the window flew in. He felt a sudden chill. Wei Bai reached out and slowly touched Fu Beijia's eyes. "Rest in peace." She actually managed to kill the target of her strategy. As expected, being a doctor was not a job that humans could do. Suddenly, something soft swept past her palm. Wei Bai paused and moved her hand away in a daze, only to see Fu Beijia open his eyes and look at her like a zombie. Wei Bai trembled. Fu Beijia suddenly used all his strength to reach out and hug her. I'm fine." When he was hit by the bullet, he thought he was dead. The cold darkness kept pulling him down. But he still had consciousness. He vaguely knew that there was someone constantly saving him. That desperate desire to keep him alive, he could feel it. He continued to climb up until he finally opened his eyes. Then he saw her sitting beside him. A hazy light shrouded her petite figure, and white snowflakes fell on her body. Her hands were stained with blood from saving him, and her eyes were filled with grief and pain. At this moment, he actually felt happy. The person desperately trying to keep him alive was her. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 99. Chapter 1109. When Li Xinghe entered the room, he saw Wei Bai sitting and Fu Beijia quietly leaning his head on her thighs. Wei Bai lowered her head and whispered something. Li Xinghe stood at the door in a daze. He actually did not think that Wei Bai could save Fu Beijia. But when he saw her hands covered in blood, holding Fu Beijia so gently, and the man on her thighs looking at her with a pair of dark and gentle eyes, his heart was overwhelmed by an unbearable pain. This feeling made him grit his teeth and bear with it. Then, he walked over with a calm expression. Fu Beijia opened his eyes tiredly, but his vigilance was still there. When Li Xinghe came up, his eyes had become especially sharp. Li Xinghe sighed, "All right, let's stop fighting for now. With your current state, I won't win honorably." Fu Beijia sneered. He really could not stand Li Xinghe's personality. So fussy. If he had this kind of opportunity to kill his enemy, he would be very happy. The more miserable his enemy was, the happier he would be. Of course, if Li Xinghe wanted to let him go, he would gladly accept. When he killed him in the future, it would be fine as long as he did not let him die too miserably. Wei Wei Bai looked up at Li Xinghe. He really was a sunny and warm man. The system's choice had never been wrong. Especially when it was specifically for her. Wei Wei Bai's voice was a little hoarse. Her body was also very tired after such a series of torment. Can you carry him to the car? Li Xinghe frowned. Fu Beige's eyelids twitched. The system secretly ate a melon. Fu Beige frowned and coldly said, "Go and call the adjutant to carry me." Li Xinghe glanced at Fu Beige, but quietly bent down, reached under his knees, and directly carried him in a princess carry. Wei Wei Bai and the system said, "Oh ho." Fu Beige looked at Li Xinghe murderously. Li Xinghe's expression did not look good either. If you don't hug her like this, the wound will split open. I will fulfill all of Wei Wei's requests. It was rare for Wei Wei Bai to ask him for something. He couldn't wait to give her his heart. Hugging Fu Beige was nothing. Fu Beige's body stiffened. He had no strength to struggle at all. He said, "Put me down." If he was carried out by Li Xinghe, his reputation would be even worse. Besides, you won't die if you carry me. Li Xinghe walked out step by step. His face was incomparably inflexible. No, you are Wei Wei's husband in name. If something happens to your body, Wei Wei will have to take care of you for the rest of your life. Don't drag her down. Fu Beige said angrily, "Go away, we are husband and wife in name." Li Xinghe's footsteps paused. A trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He did not dare to let Wei Wei Bai see anything wrong. He said, "Then you have to protect yourself even more. Don't trouble Wei Wei because of the pain here and there. If something really happens to your body, die quickly." When his father was shot by Fu Beige and was bedridden, the people taking care of him were very tired. Li Xinghe hated Fu Beige. But in front of Wei Wei Bai, he could not kill Fu Beige. This was because he did not want Wei Wei Bai to hate him. When she thought of him in the future, she would be happy and feel that he was a childhood friend and a very good brother. He would be very satisfied. As for Fu Beige, there were many opportunities to kill him. There was no need to rush to kill him now. Fu Beige and Li Xinghe's state of mind were very similar. They were as confident as a puzzle. They both felt that they could kill each other. Wei Wei Bai was just about to struggle to get up when the system said, "Do you want to leave early?" Chapter 11:10. Don't we still have time? There was still tomorrow, and they would leave the day after tomorrow. The system said, "The main system will attack you the day after tomorrow, and I don't know what method it will use to make the grenade fall on your head. It might be a weapon like an airplane." Wei Wei Bai thought for a while, "You're saying that I'll bring harm to the people around me." The system said, "The range of the grenade is quite large, and you might be next to Fu Beige, so the two of you can die together." Wei Wei Bai said, "Favorability is only 99. The system said, "Walk to the door." Wei Wei Bai, ? She obediently and slowly walked to the door. Cold snowflakes hit her face. She blinked and heard the system say, "Call out to Fu Beige." Wei Wei Bai trusted the system, although she did not know what it wanted to do. Fu Beige. Under the snowflakes, she leaned against the door, looking calm and tired. Her voice was soft and sweet. It was indescribably pleasant. Fu Beige was just put in the car by Li Xinghe, and the door was open. He turned to look at her. The system said, "Smile." Wei Wei Bai smiled. It was a pure smile, without a trace of reluctance, and her eyes were more delicate and clean than the snow. It was a very simple smile. Fu Beige's eyes softened, and he stretched out his hand. Let's go back. Wei Wei Bai nodded. The system said again, I love you. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, and was silent for a while. Her long hair was stained by the snowflakes, and she put her hand by the door, and finally opened her mouth. I love you. Fu Beija was stunned. He did not know why she would suddenly confess under such circumstances. But he could not stop the joy, and it made his haggard face brighten up. He was used to being shameless, so his face was still burning red. Fu Beige's chest was very painful. His heart was beating too fast after the surgery. But this kind of pain made him feel especially satisfied. His lips trembled. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 100. The system said, for the male lead to reach 100 favorability points from 99%, it's already a matter of course. A simple confession will do. This was the last time he used the heartwarming strategy. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod in agreement with the system. The roaring flames covered her vision, and then the sky was filled with darkness. The host has suffered heavy injuries. The mission is complete. Immediately leave this plane. Leave successfully. The bomb planted by Chenru was detonated. The range of the explosion was not large. It was in the warehouse. Wei Wei Bai, who was standing at the door, was immediately engulfed by the flames. Fu Beige's pupils shrank to the size of needles. The words in his lips trembled violently. Me too, I love you too. Wei Wei. The shrill scream made one's scalp go numb. He almost jumped out of the car, his hands clawed at the snow, and desperately crawled forward. The flames in the warehouse were hot and bright in the white snow, and all the moths were instantly turned into ashes. Fu Beija almost crawled to the door, his hands grabbing the scorching flames. But there was none. His hands hurt to the bone. But he could not grab anything. The adjutant behind him reacted and immediately rushed over to hold Fu Beija, not letting him go in to die. Put out the fire, save the madam. This sentence was futile. Everyone knew that Wei Wei Bai was gone. The system saw the chaos below, Fu Beija's painful expression, and Li Xinghe's panic of losing his mind and asking people to put out the fire. Chapter 11:11. It looked at Fu Beija blankly for a while, and there was a hint of struggle in its eyes. But soon its eyes returned to calmness, and even coldness. It held a ball of soul light in its hands. This ball of light was a lot bigger, and it was Wei Wei Bai's. From the first plane, the light was so weak that it could die at any time. Now, it had a lot of light balls. Its mood was finally better. Suddenly, it looked up at the fate roulette, and then at the soul channel. A powerful force that did not belong to this world suddenly came to the plane world. The system quickly bowed its head, sneaked through the soul channel, and ran to the real world. If Wei Wei Bai stayed in this plane for another day, she would be found by the main system. That was why it let her leave quickly. Its action of stealing the main system's data still aroused the vigilance of the main system. The main system, which had been sleeping for a long time, separated its spiritual sense to check whether there was a problem with the world. The system ran fast, so the main system did not find it and Wei Wei Bai. It safely passed through a disaster. The system carefully put Wei Wei Bai's soul back into her body. Then it reached out and gently tapped her forehead. What's wrong with eating more of your snacks? You're fat. If I don't eat more, I can't hold you. Suddenly the system was alert, it immediately shrank into a ball and hid again. Yi Yuxuan seemed to be aware of something, he looked up again at Wei Wei Bai's head, his eyes calm and scrutinizing. It wasn't out of curiosity or doubt, but calm observation. Qin Qiu hurried over. I say, how many things did you bring to the field trip? Even if you want to go out for Wei Wei to bask in the sun, you don't need to bring a box of glucose bottles. As he spoke, he began to familiarize himself with the intravenous drip to hang the glucose. Then he finished for Wei Wei Bai. Usually, when she was asleep, all kinds of medical equipment to supplement nutrition were indispensable. But unexpectedly, Yi Yuxuan patted his head and said that the scenery in the suburbs was good. Wei Wei Bai had been in a deep sleep. Not being able to see her would affect her physical and mental health. He had been in a deep sleep all this time, so why would he care about the suburbs? Pushing it to the door to bask in the sun would have the same effect. He also brought a set of medical equipment and various daily necessities. Was this an outing or was he preparing to stay in the suburbs? Qin Qiu nagged while working. Yi Yuxuan took the blanket and covered Wei Wei Bai with it. The weather was cold, and he was afraid that she would not feel well. Yi Yuxuan suddenly said calmly, "Do you see something on Wei Wei's head?" Qin Qiu blankly looked up at Wei Wei Bai's head. There was nothing. He then looked at Wei Wei Bai's hair and said doubtfully, "Did you see her dandruff? Didn't you wash her hair every day? Her hair is clean and smells good." Yi Yuxuan's calm expression turned cold. He looked at Qin Qiu with dark eyes. Qin Qiu retreated a dozen steps, for fear of being beaten by Yi Yuxuan. He can't beat him. Yi Yuxuan glanced at Wei Wei Bai's head again and said to himself, "It seems that only I can see it." Above her head, in the void, there was a golden, incomplete light. What was that? Yi Yuxuan calmly analyzed it, but he had no idea. He felt that his knowledge reserve was not enough. Although he had searched for a lot of information during this time, he still had no clue. He was impatient, curious, and he didn't have these emotions. But when it came to Wei Wei Bai, his calm heart still surged with a strong desire to solve it. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 11-12. These golden fragments are likely to have something to do with her being in a deep sleep. After Qin Qiu finished moving things, he saw the life assistant, the president's secretary, and so on standing in another place making lunch. He had nothing to do, so he found something to say. "You haven't been dreaming recently, you haven't come to me for counseling." The strange dreams that Yi Yuxuan had before were super scary. In particular, he felt that every time Yi Yuxuan talked about dreams, his whole person would change. Even a little bit of schizophrenia. But this schizophrenia would soon be controlled by Yi Yuxuan himself, and he would return to normal. And after returning to normal, he felt that Yi Yuxuan's numb emotional fluctuations would be more sensitive. Although his dreams were cruel and terrible, Qin Qiu still felt that these dreams had great benefits. As for Yi Yuxuan, he felt that he was hurt in the dream, but it was just a dream. He would be fine when he woke up. Yi Yuxuan glanced at him faintly. He didn't know why this glance was cold and cruel. Qin Qiu took a few steps back. "What are you doing?" "I just complimented Wei Wei, and you're already hating me." Yi Yuxuan shook his head. "I'm not such a stingy person. If you just touched her hair, I would want to cut off your hand." "Is this stingy?" "This is a psychopath, a control freak, and a brutal antisocial personality." Yi Yuxuan took out a comb from the bag next to him, and slowly combed Wei Wei Bai's hair in the wheelchair. "I just had a dream." Qin Qiu looked blank. Did he just sleep? How come he didn't know? Could Yi Yuxuan sleep with his eyes open? It was impossible for others, but Yi Yuxuan, if he suddenly said that he was a god or wanted to destroy the world, he felt that it was possible. Yi Yuxuan, just now in the car, when I was holding Wei Wei, I dozed off and had a dream. Qin Qiu was a little curious. What did you dream of? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a moment, and then slowly said, I dreamed that man. No, I seem to be crazy. Qin Qiu. I think you are crazy in reality, although your craziness is unique. The first time he saw Yi Yuxuan, he saw him sitting indifferently in a chair, reading those particularly profound books. He felt that this child was really crazy. He couldn't understand any of the books he was reading. What was going on? Genius and crazy. But genius. The follow-up to The Abandoned Wife of a Young Marshal in the Republic of China, Li Xinghe took off his hat and sat on the chair. His face was much older and more haggard. In front of him was the agreement. This was a decent piece of paper made by a stray dog. 4 years. He looked at the man sitting in the chair opposite him in a trance. 4 years ago, he remembered that it was also winter. She stood at the door of the warehouse, laughing, and then there was an overwhelming snowflake and a roaring fire. The white snowflakes were like paper money to pay tribute to her. During the time when she died, he and Fu Beijia stopped the war. Both sides seemed to be discouraged, and there was no trace of fighting spirit. Then after a year of peace, Fu Beijia began to take the initiative to provoke the war. Like a hot knife through butter, he pressed forward, desperately attacking the south. Li Xinghe looked at Fu Beijia all the way to victory and sneered. He felt that Fu Beijia forgot about Wei Wei Bai, so he was not sad, and finally remembered his goal of conquering the world. His ambition had long been eroded by Wei Wei Bai's death. Fu Beijia let it go so easily. Fu Beijia won. He sat opposite him and watched him sign the contract of forfeiture. After signing the agreement, Li Xinghe closed his eyes and sighed, You can kill me. The man opposite him was dressed in military uniform and did not wear a hat. Under his short black hair was a pair of eyes, cold and bright. His face was still young and handsome, and his attitude was sloppy like a hooligan. Sign it and get out of the country. After saying that, Fu Beijia nimbly took the agreement and waved his hand, I'm leaving. Li Xinghe stood up in shock, You're not going to kill me. Fu Beijia had already walked to the door. When the adjutant opened the door, snow flew in from outside. He impatiently waved his hand. In his black eyes, there was a trace of impatience. Of course I want to kill you, but Wei Wei did not let me kill you. I have to let her know that I am a man of my word. Li Xinghe's heart was sour. You actually still remember Wei Wei's words. Fu Beijia raised his eyebrows and coldly snorted, It's not like I have amnesia. She was still instructing me yesterday morning. Li Xinghe paused, as if he was struck by lightning. He saw that Fu Beijia had already walked out. The adjutant opened a black umbrella and covered his head. Li Xinghe did not care about anything else and staggered over. Fu Beijia, you're crazy. Wei Wei, she is already. A gun was pointed at Li Xinghe's forehead. And behind that cold black muzzle, was Fu Beijia's cold face. His voice was more illusory and cold than the sky full of snow. Li Xinghe, you're jealous that I have her. Li Xinghe stared at him blankly. But he did not know why his heart was sour, and tears came out from his eyes. Wei Wei Bai is dead. Fu Beijia is really crazy. / button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 11:13. When Fu Beijia returned home, the snow had covered the road outside. There was a thick layer of snow, and when he stepped on it, it would make a crunching sound. He frowned in annoyance and quickened his pace. The ringing in his ears started to appear, giving him a splitting headache. When he entered the door, he took off his hat. His short black hair was a little wet, traces of the melting snow. However, he did not feel cold at all. He was just annoyed. He did not know what he was annoyed about. When Fu Beija opened the door, he paused and suddenly called out softly, "Wei Wei." A clear and sweet voice responded from behind the door, "Fu Beija, you're back." She had always called him by his name. She did not respect him as much as other people. But it was so nice that his heart softened and melted. Maybe it was because there was always a hint of sweetness in her voice. This kind of sweetness was addictive. After hearing one sentence from her, he wanted to hear more. He did not even care about what she said. Fu Beija pushed open the door. His brows were still heavy, but he still walked in. There was a screen inside the door. But suddenly, he found that the screen was placed to one side. A woman was sitting on a chair with her back facing him. She was wearing a light green cheongsam, and she was quite beautiful. Fu Beija stopped in his tracks, and his eyes turned red. He closed his eyes, and the huge despair in his chest formed an empty sadness. He called out softly again, "Wei Wei." The woman said softly, "You're back." Fu Beija was silent. He did not even open his eyes. The woman said, "Fu Beija, where did you go? I waited for you until the food was cold." The voice was right. The tone was also delicate and charming. Even the woman's back looked like her. Fu Beija really wanted to blind his eyes, ears, and even his brain. Only in this way could he lie to himself. The woman in front of him was his Wei Wei. The woman spoke again, "Fu Beija," bang. A bullet brushed past her ear, and her hair fell off. The woman was stunned for a moment before she suddenly screamed. Her voice was completely different from when she was talking just now. It was sharp and made people feel uncomfortable. Fu Beija finally opened his eyes again. He raised his hand and raised his gun. The coldness in his eyes gradually grew. His expression was ferocious and terrifying. "Who let you in?" The woman turned around, and her face actually looked a bit like Bai Weiwei. She knelt down in horror. "Young Marshal, I." Before he could finish, a couple behind the screen suddenly appeared and knelt down in fear. "Young Marshal, we found her. After all, Madam has passed away. You can't keep using your ventriloquism to miss her. After all, the Fu family still needs descendants. Moreover, this girl was carefully selected. She resembles Madam the most." Fu Beija looked down at them. This couple was the master of ventriloquism that he had taken Weiwei Bai to see back then. All these years, every time he had a terrible headache and wanted to kill someone, he would call them over and sit behind the screen. Then, he would imitate Weiwei Bai's voice so that he could have some pitiful peace. He could even write his own lines and scripts. His sweet life with Weiwei after marriage was all written by him. In the end, he even felt that it was not written by him. This was the life that they should live. Li Xing has said that he was crazy, but he was not. He knew better than anyone else that she was no longer around. But he had to rest. He lived in the torment of losing her 24 hours a day. Thou. Chapter 11-14. He needed at least a little time every day to deceive himself that she was still around. Otherwise, he would not be able to live on. The heavy and excessive longing made him unable to bear the burden. His personality did not allow him to have thoughts of dying. He was a person who wanted to be strong and not cowardly. Even if he died, he would not die cowardly. If he directly committed suicide, he would look down on himself. He had never endured such hardships before. Fu Beija's eyes were so cold that there was no trace of anger. He said, "Get out." The couple immediately got up and walked out. As for the remaining woman, when she saw Fu Beija holding a gun, she also got up in fear and then staggered towards the door. Just as she reached the door, a bullet hit her feet. The woman was so scared that she screamed and immediately ran out. She probably did not dare to look at Fu Beija in the future. Looking at the back view that looked like Wei Bai, Fu Beija's eyes were terrifyingly cold. He could not help but shoot at the back view. His Wei would not be so timid. She was the woman who braved his bullets to enter the house and become his wife. Fu Beija chased everyone away. He stood there in a daze for a long time before slowly sitting down. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. The gorgeous furnishings, tables and chairs were no different from 4 years ago. He did not change the furnishings. Even the boxes, wardrobes, and jewelry boxes that Wei Bai kept her things were still in the house. The house was clearly filled with her things, but as time passed, in the end, her aura grew faint and distant. Fu Beija took out a cigarette and smoked quietly. In the dense smoke, he seemed to see Wei Bai walking down the stairs. Wearing the moon-white cheongsam that he chose, her calves were extremely beautiful. Step by step, she swayed gracefully down the stairs. Her face was delicate like the magnolia flower by the window sill. When she smiled, her eyes were beautiful stars. He stared blankly. The pain of the past few years melted in her eyes. Fu Beija did not even dare to make a sound. The rational part of his mind had been abandoned. At this moment, he couldn't bear to disturb himself and shatter these unrealistic fantasies. She walked down the stairs. Her footsteps were slow but far away. Fu Beija watched as she slowly disappeared into thin air. She didn't even make a sound. She was just a phantom left behind in this house. It was more like he had imagined it. Fu Beija took a puff of his cigarette. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest and lungs. The sharp pain made him start coughing. He had always been a pragmatic person. He never thought that he would one day be so fantastical. Everyone said that young Master Fu had unique hobbies. Everyone else hired a troupe to perform at home, but he hired a ventriloquist to imitate his dead wife at home. He didn't care about these rumors. But as time passed, even the ventriloquism couldn't calm him down. When he fought, he was much more innocent. Life and death came and went, and his survival instinct made him suppress his longing. But when the war was over, there was no space for him to escape. Fu Beija held back his coughs and smoked. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. He touched his face. It was full of tears. Fu Beija pursed his lips. Useless. Useless. He scolded himself. What was the use of crying? She wasn't here. Who would feel sorry for him? Fu Beija saw that the window was open and snowflakes were falling. The weather was very cold. He wiped his tears as if nothing had happened and went to close the window. After all, if he didn't close the window when it was cold, the temperature in the house would drop. If it dropped, she would fall sick. / Chapter 11:15. Fu Beija suddenly couldn't take it anymore. For the past 4 years, he had tried everything to endure and comfort himself. After a long time, his feelings would fade. He wouldn't feel so bad anymore. But those bastards lied to him. It didn't fade at all. It was still as bright as a knife, stabbing his heart every day. Fu Beija bent over. His straight body was finally crushed. He felt his heart beating violently, and his limbs were cold. In the cold winter weather, his head was covered in cold sweat. Every time he thought of her death, he had this reaction. Fu Beija felt that other people's reactions to opiate withdrawal were not as painful as his. He felt that he was also addicted. He was addicted to her. She was dead, so he could only quit. But this process was too long, and he really couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to think about her or miss her anymore. Especially when he thought of the time he would lose her, which would last a lifetime. This was a man who could face thousands of soldiers and horses on the battlefield and face piles of corpses indifferently. Suddenly, he began to feel afraid. The adjutant knocked on the door and found that no one answered. He was holding an important document in his hand, so he could only push the door open and was about to speak. But he found their young commander standing by the window. His body was almost bent, as if he was in great pain. The adjutant exclaimed, "Young commander." Fu Beija looked up fiercely. His eyes were red, and his violence and despair made people feel fear. The adjutant was frightened. But soon, Fu Beija straightened up again. The violence in his eyes disappeared, leaving behind a cold calmness. He asked, "What's the matter?" The adjutant said, "The news from the south." Fu Beija took the document from his hand expressionlessly. "I'll look at it. There's a meeting tonight. Go and inform the others." The adjutant immediately nodded. "Yes, young commander." The adjutant walked out. The snow made him shrink his neck, and he couldn't help but look back. But he saw Fu Beija standing in the room. He didn't know what he was looking at, but for some reason, he gave off a sad and lonely feeling. The adjutant didn't dare to take a closer look. He could only pretend that he didn't know and hurriedly left. 3 years later, Li Xinghe, who was in another country, suddenly received an urgent telegram. He carried his simple luggage and boarded the ship back on the same day. After returning home, he rushed straight to the hospital. When he saw the man lying on the bed, he almost couldn't recognize him. His body was so thin that not a single bit of flesh could be seen. His short black hair had also lost its luster, and there were even strands of white hair mixed in. Fu Beija had a lung problem. It was said that it was caused by long-term smoking. Of course, it was also related to his long-term self-abuse lifestyle. Li Xinghe did not know what to feel in his heart. This man who had defeated him was now only one step away from death. Or they could rely on medical equipment to live a little longer, but it would only be torture. Fu Beija did not let his guard down. When he heard the sound of the chair being moved away, he opened his eyes. His eyes were not cloudy at all. Instead, they were terrifyingly calm. Li Xinghe was not afraid of him. He said bluntly, "Why did you ask me to come back? Is it because you feel that you're going to die and I'm living a good life? You're jealous and want to kill me before you die." These 7 years, no one had it easy. All of his feelings had been worn away. After her death, the name Wei Wei Bai was like a curse. Heavy and tragic. Fu Beija struggled to raise the corners of his mouth. "None of those little brats have the guts. Only you can." Li Xinghe looked at him strangely. Fu Beija pointed to a gun on the table next to him. "Give me a ride." /to-txt. Chapter 11:16. There was no way to recover from this illness, but the hospital could only keep him alive. Because he was too important. Fu Beija did not intend to commit suicide, but he did not want to be served by others in his last days. Li Xinghe knew what he was thinking. After all, if he was the one lying on the hospital bed, he could only shoot himself. This was not because he was afraid of being tortured by treatment, but because of his self-esteem. A person who had been strong all his life would not allow himself to be weak. Fu Beija was stronger than him. Li Xinghe did not take the gun, but said calmly, "You can still move your hands, why don't you end your own life?" Fu Beige's face was sunken, and his eyes were sharper. He said in a hoarse voice, I can't bear to. Li Xinghe did not understand. Can't bear to. Fu Beige said with difficulty, at first, I couldn't bear to kill myself. I felt that I was very good, and I shouldn't kill myself so easily. No matter how painful it is, I can endure it. Endure, Li Xinghe felt that this was a good word. He was also enduring his life. Fu Beige said, later on, I couldn't endure it anymore, but I thought that no matter what, this life was saved by her. After I lost her, I was only left with the clothes and accessories that she left behind. After a long time, those things no longer had any trace of her. He was silent for a while before saying, so I'm the only life left. Since she saved it, then it's hers. He could not bear to destroy her things. Li Xinghe felt that his theory was very strange. But he thought about how he had endured for so many years. If he did not give a reason to continue, he would not have been able to endure for so many years. Fu Beige gasped for a moment. Of course, there's one last reason. Li Xinghe said, you have so many reasons not to commit suicide. When did Fu Beige become so wishy-washy? Fu Beige snorted. That's right, are you jealous? Li Xinghe frowned. You're already like this. Why would I be jealous? Am I jealous that you're losing weight? All that was left was a skeleton, and it was frightening to look at. Fu Beige said, Wei Wei likes me. No, she loves me. How can I end my relationship with her so easily? Li Xinghe, Fu Beige was right to look for him. He really wanted to shoot this thick-skinned bastard. Fu Beige had already reached the limit of what he could say. His eyes were half closed, and the cold determination in his eyes had disappeared. There was only emptiness. I can't hold on any longer, his words were almost in his mouth. She won't look down on me, right? These words were too hurtful, so careful and lowly. They were so lowly that no flowers could bloom in the dust, only wounds that covered the ground. Li Xinghe didn't say anything, but suddenly smiled. She has never been the kind of woman who looks down on others. She was so nice, why would she look down on others? After so many years, he thought that he could meet someone similar to her again. But he realized that it was useless no matter how many countries he went to, because he met more beautiful women and interesting souls. None of them could compare to her. Since he met her first, it was useless no matter how good the women were. It was a hopeless truth. Fu Beige listened to Li Xinghe's insincere words of comfort, and there was a trace of relief on his calm face. After I die, you should accept the things I left behind. This was the first time Li Xinghe saw Fu Beige speaking to him in such a gentle manner. He picked up the gun from the table and pressed it against Fu Beige's forehead. It's not your style to talk so much. Go and find her, Fu Beige. Fu Beige slowly closed his eyes. A violent gunshot was heard. Blood splattered everywhere, the last color he saw before he died. That red was the same as the day she entered the house, wearing a wedding dress, bright and dazzling. She stood inside the door. She smiled, and her voice was crisp and sweet. I'm yours, Fu Beige. I'm yours too, Wei Wei Bai. / Chapter 11:17. Qin Qiu silently pulled out a few tissues from the paper box next to him, and then sobbed and wiped his tears. Yi Yuxuan's face was calm, indifferent, without any emotional fluctuations. Qin Qiu said, You're too miserable. By the way, what happened to the bad woman who killed your family's Wei Wei? Did you cut her into 1,000 pieces? Yi Yuxuan thought for a moment. I didn't cut her into pieces. She loved her family, so I killed her family one by one, and then let her go to the streets to beg. Qin Qiu. It sounds a bit crazy. This is more terrible than taking someone's life. Qin Qiu looked up and down at the man in front of him again. He was still so cold, still so expressionless to the point of being unreasonable. He wiped his tears. Why are you not touched at all? He heard that he was hurt even in his dreams. Even if Yi Yuxuan was a stone, he would be crushed. How could he still look so calm? When he talked about his dreams before, didn't he sometimes reveal his emotions? To make Yi Yuxuan reveal his emotions, it was generally possible for a fatal blow to happen. Yi Yuxuan saw the blanket on Wei Wei Bai fall down, exposing her shoulders. He reached out and pulled her up again, his voice very calm. I'm used to it. Used to a long period of despair, and then when he opened his eyes, the beauty of returning to her side again. Yi Yuxuan felt that the man in the dream was more miserable, but he was not miserable. Because she was always by his side, even if he kept having such terrible dreams, losing her again and again. But as long as he thought of her waiting for him in reality. What came up in his heart was not the heavy and unsuppressible sadness, but the joy of relief. After experiencing it for a long time, he was able to cope with these unfamiliar emotions that came flooding in. Qin Qiu listened and wiped his nose again. Why does it sound worse? It was not enough to have this kind of dream once, he had it again and again. Moreover, the female lead of these strange dreams was always Wei Wei Bai. Qin Qiu's face was sad, and he said to Yi Yuxuan earnestly, Xian, why don't you and Wei Wei get married? I think your illness is really not light. Men are full of vigor, and it's rare to meet a girl they like. There are perverts who can't suppress their heart. Look at what you've become. Every time, he would dream of a bunch of love and hate stories with Wei Wei Bai. Every time, it was Wei Wei Bai who liked him to death. This was a typical case of things that couldn't be found in reality, and could only be found in dreams. Qin Qiu looked at Yi Yuxuan with even more pity. How could he be such an emotionless youth? He had become an unrealistic dreamer. Qin Qiu suddenly felt that being single was pretty good. It was better than dreaming. Yi Yuxuan said indifferently, it's a bit hard to hold it in, but I think if she doesn't like it, I can hold it in until after marriage. Qin Qiu, when will it be after marriage? A few days ago, they were still discussing how to make the engagement party. But as soon as Wei Wei Bai woke up, it fell through. Qin Qiu looked at Yi Yuxuan, and his face became bitter. Yi Yuxuan's heart must be more bitter than his. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such unreliable dreams every day. Yi Yuxuan looked at Wei Wei Bai. She was sleeping quietly with her eyes closed, soft and white. His expression softened, and the calm indifference in his eyes was also stained with warmth. That day will come, I can wait. He had been waiting for her for a long time. So he didn't lack the experience of waiting. And read the ad, https://m, Sashu. Com collections below to record the reading record. The Chapter 11:18. Yi Yuxuan suddenly held his breath and saw the eyelashes of the woman in the wheelchair tremble. Then she opened her eyes. Her clear eyes were blank and unguarded, and his figure was reflected in them. Wei Wei Bai blinked and blinked again. His handsome face was right in front of her. She took a deep breath and fell back, only to find that her body hit the back of the chair. She saw that she was sitting in a wheelchair, and there was an intravenous drip in her wrist. Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai was out of breath. Every time she woke up, it was her and the system. The first time she opened her eyes, it was someone else. Yi Yuxuan looked at her gently, obviously without any expression. But he was surprisingly gentle. You're awake. Bai Wei Wei pursed her lips before she breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. I'm awake. Such a mysterious conversation. Qin Qiu looked at this and that in silence. Single dogs don't care about the idea of disbanding a sour and extremely ungrounded couple. These two people look like they were made for each other. Even their conversation seemed to have a special meaning. Yi Yuxuan reached out and neatly pulled out the needle in her wrist, then pressed the wound with a sterilized cotton pad. He quickly took out an OK bandage and put it on her. The wound was very small, and the bleeding would stop soon after he put it on. He said, "Are you hungry?" His voice was flat and natural, as if she had only slept for half an hour, and when she woke up, it would be lunchtime. Bai Weiwei cautiously called the system a few times in her mind. The cowardly system didn't dare to say a word. The more pain she experienced, not only did Weiwei Bai's soul begin to become heavier. Yi Yuxuan, the man responsible for providing vitality to Weiwei Bai, also began to slowly awaken some terrible abilities. It was not at the same level as Yi Yuxuan. If Yi Yuxuan had really fully awakened, it would have been crushed by him. Therefore, the system did not dare to make a sound in front of Yi Yuxuan. It was afraid that he would be able to hear its voice like Weiwei Bai. At that time, the scene would definitely be a bloody hell. It did not dare to take the risk. Weiwei Bai had also experienced Yi Yuxuan's terrifying ability to observe micro-expressions. She did not dare to call for the system too many times, for fear of being interrogated by Yi Yuxuan again. She took a look at her surroundings. The scenery was picturesque, and the scenery was particularly unique. In the distance, the green hills were covered with maple trees. Nearby, there were gurgling streams. Even the pebbles were soaked in the water. Under the sunlight, the sparkling water looked especially beautiful. Yi Yuxuan asked again patiently, "Do you want to eat something? You eat too much liquid food, so your digestion may not be good, so I prepared some special set meals for you." He had taken over everything that belonged to her. Even Bai Changyan was sent by him to attend a business seminar. Weiwei Bai had just woken up. In fact, she had no appetite. But under Yi Yuxuan's insistent gaze, she nodded. She nodded, her mind still a little muddled. Why was she here with Yi Yuxuan? Yi Yuxuan asked people to start making lunch. He brought her a paper cup with special warm juice inside. Weiwei Bai drank the juice and watched Yi Yuxuan, like a nanny, began to busy himself. Although there was an assistant. But without orders, the assistant did not dare to help Yi Yuxuan do anything. Qin Qiu silently nibbled an apple. Suddenly, he heard Weiwei Bai say, "Where is this?" Qin Qiu finally felt that he was a person, not an invisible person. He had been squatting next to them for so long. These two people looked at him as if he was air. Collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 11-19. Qin Qiu immediately said excitedly, "This is the private forest park in the neighboring city, the scenery is great, Xian brought you here to get some sun." Weiwei Bai was confused for a moment. Private, forest park. It was a park, how could it be private? Was this not contradictory? Qin Qiu did not think so much, no matter how contradictory it was just a name. He said, "This is the Yi family's private property, the few mountains you see, including this stream, are all private property." Weiwei Bai thought she had seen a lot of things. She grew up in luxury, what kind of wealth had she not enjoyed? But she was wrong, compared to Yi Yuxuan. She thought of the biggest garden in her house, which was only a golf course. As for private mountains, private rivers, private parks, she was ignorant. Her house did not have any. Qin Qiu just said a few words before the system dared to speak. Host received 30 days of life points, deducting all kinds of access costs, mainly system snacks, a total of 15 days. Host has 1,220 days of life points left. External life points can be accommodated for 1,500 days. Wei Weibai said, now you don't report the details of the life points deducted, are you pocketing my life points? The system said, no, it's because I'm lazy, so I'll just report it briefly, your pitiful life points are not worth it for me to reach out and steal. Can you not be so proud of your laziness? Wei Weibai said. How's Yi Yuxuan? He was so calm. Her life points would not always be sucked away by Yi Yuxuan, right? The system said, no change, seems like he likes the stable period, that is, he is not excited, but the feelings are still there, if there is no big stimulation, it will always be like this, you can't farm life points, but you won't be sucked away by him. Wei Weibai said, I'm used to the days of lying down to win, if I start to stimulate Yi Yuxuan, I'm not used to it. Previously when Yi Yuxuan was emotional, she just had to wake up. He didn't have to do anything. Yi Yuxuan's HP was instantly transferred to her. The system said, humans need to be stimulated. Even if you like someone, once you've passed that passionate stage, your feelings will definitely become dull. This kind of indifference didn't mean that he didn't like it. It was the body that suppressed the excitement of liking. Let liking become a habit. Habits, on the other hand, didn't need to be controlled by emotions. It was just an instinctive action. Love you love to become instinct. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But for Wei Weibai, her instincts were too dull. If it was plain, he wouldn't be able to increase his HP. The system said, that's why you need to give him a sense of crisis. After all, you've already confirmed that he likes you, but he's sure that the two of you will definitely be together. If you don't cause trouble, his emotions won't fluctuate. The system was also trying its best to persuade him. Is it easy? I also need to make a strategy for the host. Wei Weibai rubbed her chin, deep in thought. After interacting with each other for such a long time. Although Yi Yuxuan's face was paralyzed, he wasn't the kind of crazy robot she had imagined. He was quite good to her. Wei Weibai couldn't help but say, Tongzi, there's no emotional blocker in reality. If I'm too serious in following Yi Yuxuan's strategy, I'm afraid that I won't be able to suppress my feelings. She was a human. If she didn't have any special means to deliberately get close to a man she didn't hate. After a while, she would definitely be moved. Download the at https://m, Sashu. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1120. Acting required emotions, and there was no cheat to remove them. She would fall into it sooner or later. The system said, everything is risky, how can you succeed if you don't take risks? Wei Weibai shook her head, actually, there's a more important reason why I don't want to get too close to Yi Yuxuan. The system asked, what's the reason? Wei Weibai said, Yi Yuxuan is too handsome, when I look at his face, my heart starts to beat faster. She looked up and saw that Yi Yuxuan had already spread out the picnic cloth, with all kinds of beautiful food on it. It looked like a proper suburban trip. The sunlight from the treetops fell into his black hair, and his beautiful and indifferent eyes had a bit of light. Clean and cold handsome, it made people wonder how this face could be so perfect. Wei Weibai said, it's not good for a man to be too handsome, isn't that a crime? The system said, wake up, men are dangerous, you have to wake up and treat him like pork belly, it's just 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth, what's so good about it? Wei Weibai said, pork belly is delicious too. The system was speechless. The host was done for. She was seduced by Yi Yuxuan. Wei Weibai drooled for 3 seconds, then finally put away those unrealistic thoughts. Alright, I can't like it too plain, I need some excitement. The system, ? Wei Weibai calculated with a gloomy face, I think Yi Yuxuan is too trusting of me, that's why he's not excited, I'll just let him feel a sense of crisis. The system, host, you change your face too quickly, are you afraid you'll be tempted? Wei Bai punched her palm and looked to the side. Finally, she saw Qin Qiu who was eating an apple with his head down like a hamster. Qin Qiu was not a top-notch handsome guy. But he was still handsome, his eyes were eyes, and his eyebrows were eyebrows. If it wasn't for the fact that Yi Yuxuan's cheat-like face always overshadowed her. Qin Qiu was also a handsome guy. And although Qin Qiu was a generation older than Yi Yuxuan, however, she was only 4 or 5 years older than Yi Yuxuan. Qin Qiu, who was eating the apple, suddenly felt a chill. He looked up and saw Wei Bai looking at him with gloomy eyes. It felt like the big wild wolf had taken a fancy to the little Blue Riding Hood. He was terrified. What was going on? Could it be that the way he ate the apple was wrong? Wei Bai suddenly reached out and put her hand on Qin Qiu's shoulder. Brother Qiu, do you have a girlfriend? Qin Qiu's face turned pale. His head was stiff. He twisted his neck and looked at Wei Bai's beautiful white hand on his shoulder. Qin Qiu looked at Yi Yuxuan in horror. Yi Yuxuan had just finished arranging the picnic cloth and stood up. His eyes coincidentally fell on Wei Bai's hand, and then on Qin Qiu's shoulder. Qin Qiu's mind echoed. If he touched her hair, she would cut off his hand. Now it was Wei Bai who touched his shoulder. Yi Yuxuan wouldn't cut off his shoulder, right? Qin Qiu trembled and said, No one would like me. I'm unreliable, poor and useless. No woman liked me since I was a child. With such a self-deprecation, he should be safe. But the next second he saw an even more horrifying scene. Wei Bai showed a bright and beautiful smile. I like Brother Qiu, such a pure and good man. Qin Qiu suddenly felt that the heavens wanted him dead. Lightning struck him and left him devastated. Wei Bai, in fact, I like doctors since I was a child. A handsome and famous young doctor like Brother Qiu is very close to the man I look forward to. Qin Qiu felt that his picture was already hanging on the tombstone. He was going to die. His desire to survive made him struggle, and he retreated in panic. No, I'm a quack, I killed a lot of people. Every day there are patients who want to stab me with a knife. Handsome because I had plastic surgery. Who said I'm young? In fact I'm 72 years old. I look young because I'm wearing a human skin mask. The man you look forward to has nothing to do with me. I'm not clean at all, I have AIDS. To survive, he used up his life to self-deprecate. Qin Qiu screamed all the way, and his footsteps quickly left the terrible murder scene. The system secretly said, his life value increased by 30 days. Jealousy made Yi Yuxuan desperately give him life value. Yi Yuxuan stood next to the picnic cloth. His face was very calm as he looked at Wei Bai. Only his eyes were burning a bit. Although Wei Bai's legs were not disabled, she could still stand up. But for a moment, under his eyes, her legs were soft. Yi Yuxuan slowly walked over, his hands on both sides of her chair. He leaned over, the shadow on his face, there was a kind of shaking coldness. Is it fun? He knew she was doing it deliberately. Deliberately provoking Qin Qiu, and deliberately lying. But clearly he knew, why did his heart still unbearably fluctuate? Wei Bai was as innocent as a little goblin. I'm just making small talk. Yi Yuxuan said lightly, you also make small talk with me. Wei Bai's eyes changed, and she was indescribably clingy. Then she slowly reached out and put her hand on Yi Yuxuan's shoulder. Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan was indifferent. Yes. I'm hungry. Yi Yuxuan, then he bent down in resignation, picked her up, and walked towards the picnic cloth. If you're hungry, you have to eat. Otherwise, your stomach will not be good. Yi Yuxuan silently thought. Tida, comma. Chapter 11:21. Yi Yuxuan calmly fed Wei Wei Bai. It was as natural as feeding a small animal. Wei Wei Bai felt that she should pull herself together. She couldn't let the other party control her rhythm. 30 days of life points did increase, but it didn't increase. She didn't move. The days of lying down and being fed life points were gone forever. Wei Wei Bai was already tired enough in this world. In fact, she really wanted to live peacefully with Yi Yuxuan. She didn't want to cause so much trouble. But the reality was that if she didn't cause trouble, her life points wouldn't increase. Wei Wei Bai silently pondered. Suddenly, she said, Yi Yuxuan, do you have experience? Yi Yuxuan was cleaning up the dishes. She looked like a good wife and mother. Although she looked a little cold, she was a little handsome. But the things she did were very virtuous. When he heard Wei Wei Bai's question, he was a little slow. When he understood what she was saying, there was a slight fluctuation on his face. She didn't know if it was shyness. Anyway, that expression flashed by. Wei Wei Bai didn't have Yi Yuxuan's ability to observe people, so she tacitly agreed that she didn't see it. Yi Yuxuan pushed the dishes to the side and then sat beside Wei Wei Bai. He was wearing casual clothes, so he felt more relaxed. His voice was faint, like the leaves on the tree. Are you asking about the experience of sharing a bed? Wei Wei Bai choked and then ate a piece of fruit after eating. Then she said seriously, sharing a bed, making love. If Yi Yuxuan naively thought that sharing a bed was just for sleeping, it wouldn't be good. Yi Yuxuan looked at her silently. There was a gentle emotion in his eyes. Then Wei Wei Bai heard him say, yes. Ha! Wei Wei Bai asked this question purely to tease Yi Yuxuan. Who didn't know that Yi Yuxuan lived like a robot? There was a time when Wei Wei Bai even thought that this man was an alien. He was just wearing the skin of an earthling, so he looked at humans as if they were ants. Can a human and an ant share a bed together? No. Could aliens share a bed with humans? No. So would Yi Yuxuan have the experience of sharing a bed with other women? It shouldn't. Bai Weiwei was still holding a half-eaten apple in her hand. She stared at him in a rare daze. Yi Yuxuan actually had experience. Bai Weiwei didn't know if it was an accident or something else, but she suddenly felt an uncomfortable sour feeling in her heart. She forced a smile and said, I can't tell. When did this happen? When was it? During the time when they were engaged, it should have been impossible. Even if she didn't pay much attention to Yi Yuxuan, she knew that Yi Yuxuan didn't have any female animals around him at that time. Yi Yuxuan looked at her quietly. He seemed to see the subtle changes in her expression. He smiled gently. He had never felt this way before. She was unhappy. He actually felt happy. Human emotions were really complicated. Once again, he felt an unfamiliar surge of emotion. He did something that he wouldn't do logically. Yi Yuxuan said softly with a relaxed tone, recently. Wei Wei Bai, recently. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. How recently? Yi Yuxuan, these few days. Wei Wei Bai, she asked the system softly, is this considered cheating? The system was very careful. It said almost in a whisper, you broke off the engagement. Wei Wei Bai thought about it and agreed. She couldn't increase her life points just because Yi Yuxuan liked her. // save button to record this reading. Chapter 11:22. She would have to be blind to not notice his gaze. The more indifferent a man was, the more impactful his gaze was when it was burning. Wei Wei Bai was also someone who had experienced big scenes. She swallowed this damn apple that was especially hard to swallow. She almost choked herself to death. Yi Yuxuan suddenly held the picnic cloth with his hand, leaned forward, and reached out to touch Wei Wei Bai's lips. It's stained. Wei Wei Bai immediately caught the flaw and sneered. The apple isn't stained. I've already eaten it. It wasn't a cream cake. If there were really apple crumbs on it, how could she not know? This was a clumsy way to take advantage of her. Yi Yuxuan blinked calmly, and his expression was very puzzled. Your lips are stained with saliva. Wei Wei Bai, wasn't it disgusting to say this? Yi Yuxuan said calmly, also, you can't wipe your fingers clean. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Just as she was about to reach out and wipe it herself, the arm that she had just raised was pressed down by him. He had already leaned over and kissed her lips. There was a faint apple fragrance on his lips. Wei Wei Bai felt that her experience of big scenes was not reliable. Without the emotional shield, her heart did not belong to her at all. She could not control the speed of her heartbeat. She could not control the stiffness of her body and the instinctive reaction of not being able to dodge. He kissed her quietly and gently. The contact between the lips and teeth was careful and affectionate. This kiss had the taste of fruits and the fragrance of trees. There was also the faint and cold aura on Yi Yuxuan's body. Just like that, he took away all her rights to struggle. Wei Wei Bai did not even know when it would end. She looked at him blankly and saw that his eyes were gentle and smiling. Yi Yuxuan rarely smiled, but every time he did, it made people feel that this man was glowing. His breath brushed past her lips, and his voice came slowly. My experience is all from dreams. After all, men have needs, but they don't want to scare you, so they can only do whatever they want to you in the dream to satisfy their needs. Surprisingly, there was an unnoticeable smile in his words. Wei Wei Bai, Yi Yuxuan reiterated, my body is still a virgin. You can test it. I'm very young. Wei Wei Bai felt that she had been won over by Yi Yuxuan. The rhythm of the battle had been completely taken away. The opponent's skill level was too high. For the first time, she realized that she was actually a weakling without a cheat. Yi Yuxuan completely crushed her. She shifted her hips and distanced herself from Yi Yuxuan. I believe that you are inexperienced. There is no need to verify it. This was the first time she had been so cowardly. Facing Yi Yuxuan, she actually couldn't bring herself to be tough. When she didn't have feelings, she was like the sun, the earth, and the air. When she had feelings, she didn't dare to be with Yi Yuxuan for days. Wei Wei Bai felt that she wasn't scumbag enough. She should be so scumbag that she could kick Yi Yuxuan away even if he was a freeloader. She was scared and wanted to retreat, but Yi Yuxuan was closing in on her. Why did you treat others like that just now? His voice was clearly calm. But it gave people a deep sense of questioning. Wei Wei Bai even felt that if she didn't answer well, Yi Yuxuan would become evil. She observed Yi Yuxuan and found that he was still extremely calm. She couldn't see any other emotions at all. The robot's description was not wrong at all. Wei Wei Bai laughed dryly. It's just a joke. Yi Yuxuan didn't answer and looked at her deeply. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click. Chapter 11:23. She felt the strength of his tongue between his teeth and finally couldn't help but say, I think a normal life is quite good, excitement is not good for the heart. She was going to have a heart attack. Yi Yuxuan's fingers gently touched her neck. His tone finally changed. You know that your heart is not good, don't look for excitement anywhere in the future. Wei Wei Bai quickly nodded. He seemed to like her obedience very much, the cold darkness in his eyes faded, and he gently let go of her. I'll get someone to clean up the villa here, then we'll go back. Yi Yuxuan touched her hair, then got up and walked to the assistant, calmly giving orders. Wei Wei Bai felt that she was completely suppressed by Yi Yuxuan. Even when he approached her, goosebumps appeared on her back. In the past, she was so ignorant and fearless to get close to him and flirt with him. She felt that ever since she had a slightly different feeling towards Yi Yuxuan, she could completely feel the turbulent undercurrent of his calm temperament. The more she interacted with Yi Yuxuan, the more she felt that this man could let her do whatever she wanted in the past. It was because he indulged her. Thinking of this, Wei Wei Bai felt that she was really very perfect. Even Yi Yuxuan, who was so strong, was willing to tolerate her. The system heard Wei Wei Bai talking to it about how perfect she was. It really didn't want to remind her about her life points. But Wei Wei Bai was not so easy to fool. How much is your life points? The system said, it's full, 1500, plus the 20 days you got from the strategy, it's a total of 150,020 days. Wei Wei Bai said, I've been in the strategy for so long, risking my life, abandoning my integrity, my face, and my soul have been tarnished, so I only have 20 days of life points after so many worlds. And the days Yi Yuxuan gave her was already 1500. She suddenly wondered why she was in such a miserable state. The system stroked his hair and said, that's also a strategy. Isn't the strategy to defeat Yi Yuxuan also a strategy? This was also the host's ability. Originally, it thought that its host would shamelessly praise it like before, and at the same time, praise itself to its heart's content. But this time, Wei Wei Bai was silent. Then she said, let's go. The system said, aren't you in too much of a rush? You're entering the next realm so soon. The host was getting more and more anxious. Wei Wei Bai had a rare melancholy look on her face. I can't always face Yi Yuxuan. The system asked, are you afraid that he'll absorb your life points? Wei Wei Bai, am I the kind of person who only thinks about HP? The system replied, yes. Wei Wei Bai, she couldn't deny it, so she simply didn't respond. Instead, she softly voiced her thoughts. I have to complete the strategy before I have any shameless thoughts about Yi Yuxuan. Otherwise, I might not be able to transmigrate in the future. The system asked, why? I'll always be here. At most, I'll be interrupted when you do those shameless things with Yi Yuxuan. I can still bring you there when you transmigrate. Wei Wei Bai slowly shook her head. That's not the reason. If I really like a man, then wouldn't it be cheating if I go after another man? If I really like Yi Yuxuan, I won't transmigrate anymore. Cheating was something that Wei Wei Bai couldn't tolerate. Whether it was her partner or herself. Right now, she only had some vague thoughts about Yi Yuxuan, but it wasn't enough for them to truly love each other. She couldn't go any deeper. /txt download to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click Save below to record this reading record. Chapter 1124. The system had never thought about this problem. It had seen too much of Wei Wei Bai's behavior in this world. It thought that Wei Wei Bai was a person who would be alone for life. Whoever she fell in love with would be unlucky. Of course, it felt that Wei Wei Bai was the kind of person who was so narcissistic that she would not love anyone. Except for her own family. That was why it had been encouraging Wei Wei Bai to be with Yi Yuxuan. Except for getting close to Yi Yuxuan and being able to get a considerable amount of life points from him. It felt that Wei Wei Bai would not be moved by Yi Yuxuan. The system's expression was a little ugly. Indeed, if Wei Wei Bai was really moved, with her personality, she would not allow herself to transmigrate to another man. It knew that those children of the world were all Yi Yuxuan. But Wei Wei Bai did not know. It could not tell Wei Wei Bai this secret. So at that time, it could only watch Wei Wei Bai die early because of her lack of life. This was something that it could not tolerate. The system said in a low voice, "Okay, let's go." Wei Wei Bai was sharper than it. She was right. She could not be moved by Yi Yuxuan. It would rather she be heartless than lose her life because of being moved by Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai slowly closed her eyes and leaned against the tree trunk. Suddenly, she said softly to the system, "Tongzi." The system said, "Yes." Wei Wei Bai said, "How much life points do I need to live until I'm 82 years old?" The system said, "More than 20,000 days." Wei Wei Bai said, "Then I'll quickly farm for 20,000 days, then I'll have a good relationship." When she was done with her strategy, her life points would be around 80 years old. She would try to open up her heart and mind to like him. Yi Yuxuan had just finished giving the order when she sensed something and abruptly turned around. He saw Wei Wei Bai quietly leaning against the tree trunk, her long hair scattered in front of her chest. She lay under the shade of the tree and fell asleep again. He stood there in a daze for a few seconds before quickly walking over. Yi Yuxuan crouched down and gently stroked her fair cheeks, sighing. So fast this time. There was no sign of joy or sorrow on his face. There was only a kind of gentleness that had always been in his eyes. Then he carefully lowered his head and kissed her lips. Sweet dreams. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she had a splitting headache. It was different from the pain in the past. This time, the pain was unusually strong, making her feel uncomfortable and disgusted. There was too much noise around. She propped up her tired eyes and heard someone say, "Make way, put her on the stretcher." Then, she was carried onto a stretcher. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to open her eyes and look around. She found herself in front of a stage, and on the screen, there were the subtitles of the 21st Xinhua Award ceremony. Next to her, there were people throwing shoes and cursing at her. "How did someone like you get in? You're a kept woman. Why didn't the Xinhua Award ceremony ask you to leave? You're dragging down the entire ceremony. Why did you give the tickets to a woman like her?" There were all kinds of insults. There were also hats and shoes. Wei Wei Bai felt that her role this time was not very good. She called out to Tongzi. The system did not delay this time. It said, "Wait until you're stable before transferring your memory. You have a slight concussion." Wei Wei Bai thought of the scene just now. She must have been hit in the head by someone's leather shoe. It was not easy for her to be escorted to the hospital. There was a group of paparazzi following behind her. "Wei Wei Bai, I heard that you gambled and lost all your money, right? For the sake of fame, you used despicable means of framing others for plagiarism. You leeched off the popularity of the little queen, Jiang Rou. Don't you feel ashamed?" Chapter 1125. Are you harassing Oh Jinmo because you like him too much? I heard you're pregnant, what a lunatic. Wei Wei Bai hadn't felt such a warm welcome in a long time. In the past, the target would only have a negative impression of her. Why did it feel like the whole world had negative impression of her? The doctor didn't seem to have a good expression either. He shouted angrily, "What do you think the hospital is? Get out. Who can take responsibility if something happens to the patient?" The doctor was a tall man with a handsome face. He looked very decent. Did Wei Wei Bai think that this was the target? She couldn't help but look at his name tag. Su Yehua. After a series of tests, she was hospitalized. The paparazzi were also blocked outside the hospital. During this time, no one came to see her. The system had transmitted memories because she had a concussion. It would cause headaches and aggravate the symptoms of the concussion. So it didn't transmit the information. It simply explained her identity in this world. She was a mediocre singer who wanted to enter the entertainment industry and hadn't debuted yet. The specific memories hadn't entered her brain yet. Wei Wei Bai was also happy to rest. After resting for about a day and a half, the nurse prepared porridge and side dishes for her. The nurse's attitude was very bad. Although her actions were normal, her expression was very dark. It seemed like she hated her very much. Bai Weiwei was very calm about other people's supercilious looks. Supercilious looks were on other people's faces, she couldn't dig them out. She lowered her head and quietly ate the porridge. Suddenly, the door of the ward opened. Weiwei Bai looked up casually. She saw a man wearing sunglasses. His expression was very cold. His exposed jaw was tense and had a murderous aura. He wore tight black pants and a large black crane jacket. He even carried a guitar bag on his back. His whole person was like an unsheathed sword. His clean and neat beauty had a charm that directly hit people's hearts. The system finally reminded her. This mission is to obtain O Jinma's love. Target, O Jinma. Completion, 0, time, 12 months. A year's time was very generous. Weiwei Bai felt a familiar feeling of memories entering her mind. She was already used to this kind of pain, so Weiwei Bai watched calmly as O Jinma walked in. After she finished looking through the memories, she wanted to curse him but kept it in her mouth. In the end, she choked up with a pitiful voice. Jinma. O Jinma took off his sunglasses, revealing his amber eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as honey flowing under the sun. The media once wrote that if there were angels in this century, then this angel must be O Jinma. O Jinma was a true international superstar. A man who had completely turned the weak music industry in the country upside down and changed it. He had beautiful skin that was as cold as snow. His flawless appearance was so exquisite that it made people gasp in amazement. Clearly, because of his overly exquisite facial features, he had incomparably cold offensive power. But because of a pair of overly warm eyes, he was like an angel that had fallen into the mortal world. Anyone who saw him would feel that he was the most perfect man in the world. It wasn't that Weiwei Bai wanted to use such a disgusting and lengthy description to fill up the word count. But in her memory, there were even more shameless descriptions than this. This O Jinma was simply the darling of the media, the savior of the music industry. The memories of him in her mind were all these crazy and immoral praises. Her mind had never been stuffed with so many praises. Weiwei Bai felt that she had indigestion because they were all praises for others. Chapter 1126. With so many praises for this man, her relationship with O Jinma didn't seem so obvious. O Jinma walked over. His amber eyes didn't have the warmth of the media's praises. There was only a layer of ice. Weiwei Bai, that's enough. You framed my sister and exposed our relationship. You're crazy for fame. Weiwei Bai still had a mouthful of porridge in her mouth. To not ruin her acting, she immediately swallowed it. Then she put on a serious expression. Believe me, I didn't frame her. She really plagiarized. O Jinma frowned impatiently. That's enough. I'm here to tell you that my relationship with you is over. Ding, the male lead's favorability is -35. The familiar formula, the familiar favorable impression points. Weiwei Bai laughed. Her relationship with O Jinma was like this. O Jinma's character was set up by someone. His character was an angel of the music industry. For a grown man to stick to such a character, he was simply crazy. This illness started when he was young. The original owner and Oh Jinmo were neighbors. At that time, she was called Wei Wei Bai and her nickname was Xiao Hua. Oh Jinmo was called Oh Dashu and his nickname was Big Tree. Yes, they were the village flower and village grass respectively. Oh Jinmo was beautiful when he was young. The village grass was prettier than the village flower. Because he was fostered, he used his beauty to pretend to be sensible and cute to survive. Because of this, he lived well. With this character of pretending to be obedient, when he grew up, he pretended to be pure in the music industry and didn't understand the world. One didn't understand the world, but was overflowing with talent. His voice was like being kissed by God. He was also a singer who could write his own songs. He was simply a rare treasure. Oh Jinmo especially enjoyed the convenience and vanity of his character. He was addicted to pretending to be an angel. Almost no one knew how hypocritical his character was. But at this time, a woman who knew about his past appeared. She was the original owner, Bai Xiaohua. Bai Xiaohua was a fan of Oh Jinmo. Because of their relationship when they were young, she went to the fan meeting. That was the first thing he said. "Big Tree, you've grown up." Oh Jinmo. It was not easy for him to give himself such a tall and Western-sounding name, Big Tree. At that moment, the angel's gentle smile was about to crumble. Bai Xiaohua tried her best to get close to him. "I like your songs very much." When you were young, at that moment, Oh Jinmo wished he was dead. He must not let this village belle say that when he was a child, he stole fish from the fish pond naked. He had climbed up a tree to steal a bird's nest and sneaked into her kitchen to steal sweet potatoes. Moreover, Oh Dashu's name was extremely violent. It must not be leaked. He wanted to kill her on the spot. Even though Oh Jinmo hated Bai Xiaohua so much at that moment, it was to the point of exploding. However, he had never killed anyone before. He was afraid that he would fail, so he didn't do it. He was afraid that Bai Xiaohua would reveal his tragic childhood. Therefore, he met with Bai Xiaohua alone. Xiaohua was excited. "Big Tree, you," Oh Jinmo showed a disgusted expression. "Don't call me that in the future. Also, don't tell anyone about us. I'm not Big Tree. I'm Oh Jinmo." He loathed his ugly and inferior childhood. He hated it even more when he saw his childhood neighbor. Only then did Bai Xiaohua realize that she had met an old friend in a foreign land. Oh Jinmo looked at her coldly. He was not an angel at all. "What conditions do you have? I heard that you can write songs yourself. Do you want to enter the music industry? I'll let you debut." Slash. Chapter 1127. Bai Xiaohua didn't expect Oh Jinmo to be so cold. She was stunned. Oh Jinmo was afraid that she would ask for too much. He immediately said, "This opportunity is very rare for an outsider with no talent. If I take this opportunity, we won't have anything to do with each other in the future. We won't know each other even if we meet." Bai Xiaohua shook her head and said hesitantly, "I have a request. If you fulfill it, I will pretend that we don't know each other." Bai Xiaohua was also confused. She really liked that Oh Jinmo was threatening her. Oh Jinmo gritted his teeth and said, "Don't push your luck." Bai Xiaohua said, "I want you to date me for a month." Oh Jinmo didn't want to agree to this condition at all. But Bai Xiaohua wasn't a pushover either. She exposed it on Weibo that night. "I have a big brother Tree." This sentence didn't have any meaning. Besides Oh Jinmo, no one would understand. So Oh Jinmo agreed to it. When they were dating, they wouldn't have any physical contact. They would only meet once a week and there wouldn't be any photos. When Wei Wei Bai saw this, she felt that Bai Xiaohua was dating a ghost. Oh Jinma treated dating like air. And the image of Bai Xiaohua as a scheming girl was fixed in Oh Jinma's heart. Then, during this month, Bai Xiaohua did everything she could do. Because of Oh Jinma, she came into contact with Oh Jinma's half-sister, Jiang Rou. And Bai Xiaohua was considered to have some talent. She even wrote a very good song. This song was her stepping stone to enter the entertainment industry. But before it could be published, Jiang Rou stole the original manuscript. With this song, Jiang Rou went from being a mediocre singer who could only rely on Oh Jinma's reputation to survive. She didn't have any representative songs. She completely exploded. The song was good, and Jiang Rou had a sweet voice. Most importantly, she was Oh Jinma's younger sister. His sister actually knew how to write songs. This was simply a family of geniuses. That was why the news about the family of geniuses had been spreading like wildfire. As for Bai Xiaohua, she was unwilling to let her results be stolen. She exposed it on Weibo, but because the original manuscript was missing, she was scolded by Jiang Rou's fans to the point that she almost committed suicide. Later on, Oh Jinma even called her and scolded her for being disgusting. Bai Xiaohua was so angry that she went to drink. When she got drunk, she actually revealed her relationship with Oh Jinma to the public. But because the two of them really didn't have much interaction, there were no photos or anything. Oh Jinma did not respond either. Bai Xiaohua was once again on the hot search list. And Oh Jinma had completely stopped contacting her. Bai Xiaohua really liked Oh Jinma, so she heard that he was going to the Xinhua Award ceremony. After racking her brains, Bai Xiaohua got a ticket and went in. In the end, in less than 10 minutes, she was recognized by Oh Jinma and Jiang Rou's fans. Then, it was the scene when Wei Wei Bai woke up. Oh Jinma appeared again, and the annoyance in his eyes was obvious. You're too much. I've never seen such a scheming woman who would do anything to become famous. After sorting out those memories, Wei Wei Bai quickly adjusted her state of mind. She clutched her clothes tightly and looked at him with a haggard and pale face. There was vulnerability and fear in her eyes after being hurt. Oh Jinma was indifferent and couldn't be bothered to look at her. I'll pay your hospitalization fees. This is the last time. After saying that, he turned and left. It was as if he was afraid of getting into Wei Wei Bai's bad luck. Chapter 11:28. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "Did you know that Jiang Rou stole my original work?" Oh Jinma. This was the first time she had called him with such a cold voice. Oh Jinma's footsteps paused, and his voice turned cold. How can you be so thick-skinned? How can someone as evil as you create good works? Wei Wei Bai finally could not hold back her sobs. Oh Jinma, don't you know what kind of talent Jiang Rou has? If she was really talented, she would have been famous long ago. How could she only become famous after meeting me? Oh Jinma turned his head, his eyes indifferent. So what? Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly, as if she could not understand his words. Oh Jinma's angelic appearance finally had a hint of evil. Anyway, you're hated by everyone now. No one will believe anything you say. The village child in the quagmire should obediently go back to farming. Don't come out and make a fool of yourself. Bai Weiwei seemed to react. You let me be slandered, just to make me become a rat crossing the street. No one will believe me. Now, even if she said that she was Oh Jinma's neighbor, no one would believe her. Oh Jinma smiled coldly, turned his head, and returned to his gentle expression. He left without saying a word. Wei Wei Bai's expression also changed after he left. Then she lowered her head and ate her porridge. Tongzi, this person is too hypocritical and shameless. I feel like I'm going to die from looking at him. The system said, me too. Oh right, your side reward is here. Wei Wei Bai said, this is the first time you're so eager to give me a reward. What's wrong with you? The system found a one-time reward in the trash and happily sent it to Wei Wei Bai. Ding, the host is rewarded with the animal transformation skill. Wei Wei Bai, the system said, this skill allows you to transform into any animal. Do you want to try? When you're asleep, your soul can cross over into an animal's body. Wei Wei Bai, haha, thank you. Why did she turn into an animal? Should she turn into a wild boar and kill Jinmo? Suddenly, she had a flash of inspiration. Can this skill be used on others? Yes, but it can only be used on one person. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up, and then she slowly revealed an evil smile. Jinmo returned to his own house, which was very luxurious. There were all kinds of expensive musical instruments, and the floor was covered with sheets of musical scores. There were also all kinds of gold ornaments that were not suitable but were very expensive. Jinmo thought about how he had finally gotten rid of that scheming woman, Wei Wei Bai. He was in a great mood. He put down his guitar and began to write a song on the sheet of music. This song was very pleasing to the ears. He was talented, and even had a musical sensitivity that far surpassed others. But unlike what the outside world said, he didn't write music as if it was a game. To maintain his image as a peerless genius who could become a god even if he did not work hard. Basically, he lived a relaxed life during the day, and when he returned home, he would desperately write songs, learn songs, and practice his voice. He did it to get everything he had today. To get everyone's praise. He did it with all his might. That was why he hated Wei Wei Bai so much. He was clearly so different from when he was young. No one knew about his childhood, but Wei Wei Bai appeared. And now that Wei Wei Bai's reputation was ruined, no one would believe her words. Jinmo could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He poured himself a glass of wine, shook it pretentiously, drank it, and smacked his lips. It did not taste good, but one bottle cost tens of thousands. It was not even as good as the soup base of the spicy hot pot. He was the little angel prince, so the food he ate had to be elegant. He even had a small character who liked to eat sweet things. This character had won over a large number of young fans. But in reality, he was a rough man who liked extremely spicy hot pot, stinky tofu, bean noodles, fried meat skewers, and the like. He especially hated sweet things. Jinmo took a relaxing shower and went to bed early. After dealing with Wei Wei Bai, he was the elegant little angel again. After closing his eyes for a while, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Why was it so cold? Did he open the window? He immediately opened his eyes and realized that he was lying outside. It was so dark. Did he transmigrate? Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to have become shorter. He raised his hand and saw that his furry and sharp little claws were moving. Jinmo was so scared that he trembled, and the fur on his body stood up. He shouted loudly what was going on. But what came out was, meow. Jinmo was stunned. He did not expect that one day, he would grow fur on his body. It was not the wings of an angel. It was cat fur. He turned into a cat. Jinmo was greatly shocked. He hugged his head with his two little claws and had a silly look on his face. He must not have woken up yet. He should continue sleeping. Jinmo curled up into a ball and trembled as he closed his eyes. But in the next second, he suddenly flew into the air. Someone grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. When he opened his eyes, he saw a familiar face appear. He immediately stiffened. It was Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai looked at him and slowly revealed a witch-like smile. Chapter 1129. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and reached out to grab him. Oh Jin Ma swung his claws at her. His claws scratched the back of her hand. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and there were a few bloody scratches on the back of her hand. Oh Jin Ma smirked and landed on all fours. He almost lost his balance. He staggered a few steps as if he was drunk. He was afraid of being caught by Wei Wei Bai and walked forward with his hands and feet. Kitten, come back. Wei Wei Bai suddenly shouted at him. Oh Jin Ma looked at her arrogantly. Did she really think that he was a cat that would listen to everything she said? The strong headlights shone on Oh Jin Ma. Oh Jin Ma's eyes were dazzled and he jumped back. But it was too late. A sports car that was huge for Oh Jin Ma was heading towards him. He had just transmigrated into a cat. He thought that this was the most bizarre and tragic thing in the world. But he was wrong. The most tragic thing was that on the first day he transmigrated into a cat, he was crushed into a meat patty. At this critical moment, a figure jumped out from the side and scooped him up, hugging him into a warm embrace. Oh Jin Ma was stunned. His nose was filled with Wei Wei Bai's light and warm scent. Her heart was beating fast and her body was trembling. But she still hugged him tightly. The sports car sped past them. He didn't notice that a woman was hugging a cat. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't rushed out to hug him and shifted their position, Oh Jin Ma would have died. Oh Jin Ma retracted his claws and released them. He tilted his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a complicated expression. But he realized that she was squatting on the ground. Her face was pale and her breathing was heavy. She helplessly tugged at the corner of her mouth and revealed a bitter smile. Don't run around. There are traps and dangers everywhere. No one will save you. Oh Jin Ma narrowed her eyes, her mouth drooping. Her expression was blank for a moment. It was as if he felt that she was different from what he had imagined. Wei Wei Bai squatted for a while before she forced herself to get up. Oh Jin Ma realized that her legs were weak. Thinking back to when the car rushed over, he thought he was going to die. In reality, even if a person was killed by a car, no one would help. Not to mention that he was now a cat, who would be willing to take the risk to save him. He curled up in Wei Wei Bai's still warm embrace. His little cat paw rested on her arm and silently retracted his paw. Maybe Wei Wei Bai wasn't going to cook him. Was it because she actually liked cats? Oh Jin Ma would never admit that his opinion of her had changed. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. Wei Wei Bai walked to the roadside and picked up a shopping bag. Oh Jin Ma realized that he was in a garbage dump. And Wei Wei Bai only saw him when she came out to buy things. Wei Wei Bai carried the shopping bag, hugged the cat again, and walked into the nearest store. She asked if there was any cat food and some things that the cat needed. But there wasn't. Wei Wei Bai didn't have a trace of impatience. On the streets in the middle of the night, she hugged him and asked at least 3 stores. Finally, she asked the right place. Oh Jin Ma's expression changed from disdain to silence. She didn't need to care about him. But she walked to buy the things that the cat needed. Wei Wei Bai bought some pet supplies. Then she walked back to her rented house. It was already late at night. She opened the door. The rented house was very simple. But Wei Wei Bai decorated it very cleanly and warmly. On the wall, there was a poster. Oh Jin Ma took a look. Wasn't this his poster? /download address. Chapter 1130. He felt disgusted at the thought that this woman was his fan. After doing so many shameless things, she still had the cheek to hang up his poster. Wei Wei Bai put him down and went to boil some water. Jinma looked at the poster and tried to use some strength to jump up. He had never been so light before. Without much thought, he scratched the poster with his claws. He wanted to take the poster down, but his claws were not accurate and destroyed the poster. Seeing that there were a few more scratches on his handsome face, he unhappily used his soft cat paws to wash his face. Halfway through, he looked at his claws in shock. Would humans use their own hands to wash their face? No, only cats would. He had only turned into a cat for 1 or 2 hours, but he had already learned how to use his hands to wash his face. Jinma was so frightened that he immediately put down his claws and sat down obediently. Although he was sitting, he couldn't help but look around. He saw that there was a photo frame at the head of the bed. It was actually a magazine photo of him that Wei Wei Bai had cut out and put in. Beside his photo was a photo of Wei Wei Bai smiling brightly. There was an obvious white gap in the middle. The style and color of the photo were different. Jinma snorted. How much did she like him? How could she do such a lowly thing? Jinma was not happy at all to be liked by a woman he hated. There was a rush of movement from the bathroom. Bai Weiwei came out and reached out to pick him up. Jinma looked stubborn and proud. His cold cat face and amber eyes looked at Wei Wei Bai disdainfully. Wei Wei Bai liked him. Although he hated her, he felt a sense of superiority when he saw her. People who were liked were always fearless, and cats who were liked were the same. Wei Wei Bai put him next to the basin and said gently, "You've been wandering outside for too long. I'll give you a bath." Jinma turned his head away. He didn't know why, but his legs turned to jelly when he saw water. He suddenly saw himself in the mirror. It had a round pancake face and drooping mouth. Its hair was so messy that it looked like a ball of wool that had been in the garbage for 100 years. What was even more frightening was that he thought that a handsome soul like him could be considered to have transmigrated. Shouldn't it be a handsome cat? How could it be such a dirty, horrible, dull-faced, and ugly demented cat? Jinma was frightened by its reflection in the mirror and let out a meow. Fuck, this isn't me. He quickly jumped into the water and used his cat paws to wash his face. He must be too dirty. He shouldn't be so ugly. He had never looked so ugly before. Wei Wei Bai was splashed with water and couldn't help but laugh. I've never seen a cat that likes bathing so much. You're so cute. Jinma looked at her with round eyes. Under the light, she had a happy smile on her face and her eyes were sparkling because of her smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -25. Jinma stared at her for a few seconds with a face full of water before turning around. Its cat face looked like it had nothing to live for. What was wrong with him? Why did he think that such an annoying woman was beautiful? After he became a cat, even his sense of beauty wasn't human anymore. Yes, in his eyes, such an annoying Wei Wei Bai wasn't a human anymore. Wei Wei Bai finished bathing him and quickly picked him up with a large towel. Jinma looked at himself in the mirror. Because his hair was wet, it was messy like needles exploding. He was even uglier. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1131. He transmigrated into an ugly cat. Life was hopeless, and the cat life was hopeless. Wei Wei Bai wiped him clean and used a hairdryer to carefully dry him. She finally saw what this stray cat looked like. It was actually a blue-gray short-haired cat. It was so hungry that it was barely left with a round face. This skill could only allow Ojinma's soul to enter a cat nearby at random. Wei Wei Bai had been looking for Ojinma for a long time. Wei Wei Bai unwrapped the cat food for him. When Ojinma saw such a deranged thing, his whole cat group exploded. He crawled on all fours and jumped from her lap onto the blanket. Then, he used his paws to pull the blanket over his head, revealing 2 orange eyes. He looked at Wei Wei Bai in horror. Eat cat food. Was this something a human should eat? Even if he were to starve to death, he would definitely not eat a mouthful of cat food. Wei Wei Bai smiled gently as if she was coaxing a child. Eat something, okay? Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep if you're hungry. Oh Jinmo, meow. Get lost. Wei Wei Bai patiently coaxed him. It's not good for your body if you don't eat. Oh Jinmo snorted coldly and rolled away with his back facing Wei Wei Bai. He would rather die than eat. Let him die. Wei Wei Bai looked at this skinny, flat-faced cat. He was so arrogant. It was funny but cute at the same time. She felt that if she forced Ojinma to eat cat food from the start, he would definitely fall out with her. She could only go to the kitchen and cook some white meat for him without any seasoning. Then, she cut it into small pieces and put it in a bowl. She found a can of salmon in the fridge. Then, she took out some and put it on a small plate. Then, she fed it to Ojinma. Ojinma actually didn't want to eat, but his body didn't know how long he had been hungry. The cat food made him determined to go on a hunger strike. However, once he saw food that resembled humans, he couldn't help but lower his head to eat meat and fish. It actually tasted pretty good. Wait a minute, he ate with his mouth. Ojinma looked at the half-eaten food in shock. He, a dignified human, had actually given up on the dignity of a human. He ate with his mouth. He stared blankly at the dried fish. Sadness surged in his eyes. The more he looked, the sadder he felt. The sadder he felt, the more he felt, why does this dried fish look so delicious? Then, Mr. European Cat endured the humiliation and finished everything. After eating, he spread out his limbs and occupied Wei Wei Bai's bed, snoring comfortably. A warm and comfortable bed, a clean body, and a full stomach. Ojinma started to feel sleepy as he savored the taste of the dried fish. Suddenly, he saw Wei Wei Bai looking up at the wall. He suddenly thought of something and immediately turned his head to look. It was his poster. This woman, was she thinking about dirty things while looking at his poster in the middle of the night? Ojinma's expression was cold and disdainful. That was all she could do. Anyway, she definitely wouldn't be able to get close to him in the future. She could only look at his poster and live the rest of her life in regret. Just as he was thinking about this, Wei Wei Bai stood up and nimbly pulled the poster off the wall. She was so nimble that there wasn't a trace of hesitation. Ojinma stared at her with wide eyes, only to see her expressionlessly tearing the poster apart, crumpling it into a ball and stuffing it into the rubbish bin. Wei Wei Bai complained helplessly, "Sigh, there's too much rubbish. We have to take out the rubbish tomorrow morning." Rubbish. That was his poster. Wei Wei Bai looked around and flipped through some magazine photos of Ojinma. There were also some newspaper photos. They were all things that groupies would collect. Wei Wei Bai threw them away expressionlessly. Ojinma looked at her as if she was throwing rubbish. Not only did she not hesitate, but she also looked at him with disdain. She threw away a bunch of his things. Ojinma's heart twitched as he looked at her. Suddenly, he saw a picture frame at the head of the bed. Bai Weiwei also caught a glimpse of it. A man and a cat looked at it silently. Just as Ojinma thought that Wei Wei Bai missed him and couldn't bear to throw it away. Wei Wei Bai frowned. How could I make such a lowly thing? It's disgusting. Oh, Jinma's fur drooped. He didn't know why, but when he saw Wei Wei Bai throw his things at him, his mood soured. He didn't like it when she chased after him. Wei Wei Bai was very calm as she threw the picture frame into the rubbish bin. Then she turned off the lights, got on the bed and hugged Oh Jinma. Go to sleep. Her voice was muffled. Oh Jinma felt warm. His round face was pressed against her chest. Although it was comfortable, wasn't this taking advantage of her? He hesitated and wanted to push her away with his cat paws. But in the next second, the cat fur on his head suddenly became wet. He looked up in a daze and a few drops of water hit his forehead. He belatedly realized that it was by Wei Wei crying. Her crying was suppressed and it made one's heart ache. Her body was also trembling because of the immense pain that she was suppressing. I won't do it again, Oh Jinma heard her cry softly. I won't like that scumbag anymore. Oh Jinma was dazed for a moment before he reacted. Was the scumbag she was talking about him? Oh Jinma suddenly reflected on himself. Did he go too far in making her shout at him? Ding, the male lead's favorability is -20. Comma. Chapter 1132. You can search for Transmigration System, Adonis, come to Sashu. Com in Baidu to find the. He did not know how he fell asleep, but after a night of strange things, he finally woke up. He stretched his limbs and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He opened his eyes and found that he was a human again. Oh Jinma jumped up in surprise and checked his body. He was really back. Was last night the dream? Oh Jinma thought about it, his hands unconsciously bent as he washed his face. After washing his face, Oh Jinma wanted to chop off his human paws. What was wrong with him? He had a dream and woke up as a cat. He quickly went to wash himself, but halfway through, he suddenly remembered how it felt to be bathed by Wei Wei Bai last night. Her hands were soft as she gently washed the dirty fur on his body. She was afraid that he would catch a cold, so she wrapped him in a towel. It was very warm and very comfortable. Oh Jinma quickly stopped his memories. It was just a stupid dream, what was he thinking about? He opened the fridge and wanted to eat breakfast, but when he saw a can of fish, he reached for it. When he started cooking the white meat, he realized that he was a human, not a cat. What was the point of eating this? But since it was already cooked, he could not waste it, so he ate it. The taste was very light, but it was delicious when he was a cat. Why was it not delicious when he was a human? Oh Jinma silently warned himself that it was just a dream. Wei Wei Bai woke up and was face to face with a big face cat. The cat said, meow. Wei Wei Bai said, speak human language. Meow Me said, meow woo woo. The system said, it said it was hungry. Wei Wei Bai said, oh Jinma is gone. The system said, his body is awake, so his soul will automatically return to his body. Then the cat will become the original cat. Wei Wei Bai said, can't this function make Oh Jinma a cat? Bad review. The system was speechless. It was possible when it was first bought, but it broke down later on, so it could only be like this. The system silently looked at its pile of trash. They were all semi-defective goods. It silently tidied up its own garbage. Although it was semi-defective, it was still a poor ghost. They were all treasures that could be used to fool the host. Who asked the host to only have it as a system, so it didn't have much experience. Without seeing good things, there was no way to compare. Thinking of the host forum, its host didn't have the authority to access it, it felt lucky. If he saw those hosts on the forum who were living a life of debauchery and were so happy that they could go to heaven, the host would definitely not want it. Wei Wei Bai went online and found that her Weibo was filled with all kinds of personal attacks. There were fans of Jiang Ro, but most of them were fans of the little angel, Oh Jinmo. Oh Jinmo's fans were unique in the entertainment industry because of Oh Jinmo's persona. A bunch of retarded guardian angels formed the Retarded Alliance and doted on Oh Jinmo like their own son. Every one of them felt that they were the messengers of justice. Their MOMO wouldn't scold people and wouldn't retaliate when hurt. So Oh Jinmo's fan club was full of aggressive fans. For example, the previous time when the host sneaked into the audience of the award ceremony, she was spotted by Oh Jinmo's fans. That was why the tragedy of the award ceremony happened. Wei Wei Bai browsed through the comments. Then she stared at the computer and pondered. Most of the comments were focused on how shameless she was for daring to use Oh Jinmo's relationship to gain fame. Jiang Ro's plagiarism was less conspicuous because she didn't have many fans. Crossover system, Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1133. And the plagiarism of Jiang Ro was the fuse that made Oh Jinmo fall out with her. He had always thought that the original owner was a scheming woman, but when the plagiarism incident came out, he immediately labeled Wei Wei Bai as a disgusting person. Wei Wei Bai felt that the reason why his favorability towards her increased so quickly last night was because when a person suffered a huge blow, they would instinctively rely on the person who gave them a sense of security. Oh Jinmo must have suffered a huge blow when he turned into a cat last night. He almost died under the wheels of a car and was saved by her. That was why he felt less disgusted with her. But his impression of her was still as bad. Wei Wei Bai stared at the plagiarism comments and suddenly asked the system, "Is there anything that can make me sing or create awesome songs?" The system flipped through the products in the discount section. There's an old talent booster recently. Because it's old, it's been replaced in the discount section. You can buy 50 days of life. Wei Wei Bai was about to have a heart attack. 50 days. The system said, "It's still on discount. If it's not on discount, we won't be able to afford it." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Is this thing useful?" The system said, "Of course. It can make you light up 3 talents, and all of them can reach your body's limit." Wei Wei Bai pressed on her heart, "Use it, use it." Luckily, her current life points were in thousands. Otherwise, at the rate at which she earned 30 days' worth of HP in a single plane, killing her would not have cost her that much HP. Although the original owner had some talent. But this talent was poured into the song that Jiang Ro plagiarized. Some people could write such a good song in their lifetime. This was still considered a talented person. Unfortunately, the original owner only had this bit of talent. Her voice wasn't particularly good either. It couldn't even compare to Jiang Ro's voice. So Wei Wei Bai didn't have a choice. Singing and writing songs required a lot of practice, and it required a lot of talent to succeed. He had no choice but to use his savings. The system clicked, buy, and Wei Wei Bai received the talent booster. She did not hesitate to put her talents into singing and composing. When he lit up the compose button, the lyrics button also lit up. The system said, "After your composing talent increases, the talent tool will give you a lyricist talent." Wei Wei Bai only had one skill left. She chose the pet skill. After all, she had to raise a cat. If she didn't have the ability to raise a pet, it was possible that she would raise the pet to death. She thought about how she had raised Oh Jinmo to death. The favorable impression points would probably shoot up into the atmosphere like a rocket. Negative favorable impression points would shake the heavens and earth. After Wei Wei Bai had chosen her talent, she felt that her talent in music composition was soaring. This feeling was very obvious. For example, when he heard a song, he could understand and analyze how many methods were used to produce the song. But when he was writing songs, the moment he raised his pen, it would be a golden song. This was simply too good. The 50 days were not wasted. Wei Wei Bai finally felt that her heart did not hurt so much. She went online to check and found that the recently hyped Hua Nation's Best Song competition was starting to audition. Hua Nation's Best Song competition, as the name suggested, was looking for original talents from all over the country. Everyone had to bring their own original songs to participate in the competition. Then, every round, they had to sing their own original songs. During the first season of this competition, it was very amazing in the early stages. It was also the viewership champion that year. But in the second half of the competition, it collapsed. Chapter 1134. That was because all songwriters knew that it was impossible for one person to write many good songs. And this program required all of them to be original works. It also required original songs from more than 10 rounds of competition. In the beginning, the songs that were taken out were the best written songs. Towards the end, the audience's appetite was whetted. But they found that the songs were getting worse and worse. Even on the Champions Night, none of the songs were listenable. This caused the program to fail. And to recover ratings, the program team hyped up, pulled in couples, exposed all kinds of dark secrets of the contestants, and used all kinds of tricks. They did whatever they wanted. This caused the program's reputation to collapse. Although they were scolding, the program still had ratings. Wei Wei Bai watched the recent talent shows launched by several programs. She still decided to go to this original composition competition. Because the program director of this competition was shameless enough to do anything for ratings. But the director was very insistent on one thing: to eliminate any singers who were not original and plagiarized works. Even the contestants who bought the songs were immediately eliminated once they were found out. The director's bottom line was originality, and he had no bottom line other than originality. So she participated in this program, as long as her works were all original. Then, even if Jiang Ro suppressed her, the director team would not eliminate her. Because she had enough topics, scolding brought ratings. This was also recognized by people in the industry. Wei Wei Bai submitted the registration form online. Seeing that there was still a week before the audition, she put it aside and continued to write songs. She had 50 life points. How could she earn back if she didn't write more? Wei Wei Bai went to feed the cat halfway through writing, and then she ate something to continue writing. The paper in the room was casually thrown on the ground. The talent booster didn't give her songs directly. Instead, she needed to fumble around and write them herself, and guaranteed that the songs she fumbled around would be especially good. This was considered to be talented. When the original owner wrote, she used a guitar. Generally, songwriters would have an instrument. She was afraid that writing a song with a pen would be too weird, so she took the guitar and found that she played well. The original owner had her own skills. The incomplete notes on the paper all over the floor gradually formed 2 or 3 particularly good songs. Wei Wei Bai found that the night was dark. She yawned, rubbed her eyes and went to cook. When he went to feed the cat, he found that the cat had changed. This change did not need Oh Jinma to say anything. She could see it from the big cat's face. The cat that Oh Jinma possessed had an expression that said, "You bunch of stupid mortals don't deserve to live. Even if I'm a cat, I'm still a cold and noble little angel." To be honest, this expression was really asking for a beating. When Wei Wei Bai saw him, her lazy expression immediately turned into joy and doting. She was a cat lover, and she always kept in mind that she was a lively little animal. "Little tree, you are too skinny. I will get you some meat and fish. Eat some cat food too." Oh Jinma's face was sluggish. He turned his head, and his expression was hideous and twisted. He just drank a little and went home to sleep early. Why did it turn into a cat? This is impossible. This can't be real. Is this not a dream? No, he didn't believe it. His face was filled with despair. Suddenly, his cat head was rubbed by someone. He immediately covered his head with his paws and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a grimace. Meow, don't touch me. Wei Wei Bai's smile became friendlier. Little tree, it's time to eat. Oh Jinmo, little tree. What's with this lousy name? He hated his first name the most. Big Tree, this lowly name, was simply a disgrace to him. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.